Introduction. I didn't want to be there. Loud conversations drifted past my ears as I tried to sink further into the wall behind me. The warm arm of my fiancé that encircled my waist did nothing to soothe the erratic beating of my heart. Truthfully, when my fiancé came to pick me up that day, I almost told him that I couldn't go, but I had run out of plausible excuses. If I tried to get out of seeing his friends again, he would have seen right through it. So here I was, at his best friend's birthday party, hoping that the ground would swallow me whole. I inhaled, steeling myself for the words I was about to say. "It was nice seeing you all again." I made a movement with my hand as a gesture to say goodbye. I didn't give anyone a chance to return the favor before I headed toward the door, my fiancé close behind me. I couldn't handle seeing their faces, judging me. We would argue about this later, in the car on my way home. He would yell, saying their judgment is in my head, that none of them had a problem with me, that I needed to do something about the paranoia that stopped me from enjoying my life. I would apologize, seeing the truth in his words, feeling the shame of letting my social phobia ruin yet another gathering. I couldn't bring myself to care. In that moment, all I cared about was running as far away as I could from all those people and conversations. I didn't know what was wrong with me, why I couldn't handle the slightest human interaction without being hyper-aware of every movement and word I spoke. All I knew was that I had to get out of there and that something needed to change. I needed to change. If you're listening to this, then I'm guessing that you know exactly how I felt at that moment. You might think that you are alone in your struggle, that some people are born calm, and you happen to be one of the unlucky ones born more anxious. Maybe you think that most people don't feel this way, that you are an outlier, cursed by the hands of fate. I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. Luckily for you, and anyone else that suffers from social anxiety, every mind is capable of learning resilience. Athletes aren't born with fast endurance and tremendous strength. They have to train and work for what they have. Just as you have to exercise to grow a muscle, you must also train your brain to grow stronger. You won't become a track star after using the treadmill a few times. And the same is true with recovery. Fighting social anxiety is hard work that won't happen overnight. There is no magic switch, no button you can press that will make the anxiety go away. Social anxiety is a brutal thing to live with. It will take anything and everything it can get, your friends, your family, your job, but it will only take what you allow it to take. It is up to you to face it head on. Only then will you find peace. This book was written to give you the tools you need to do just that, to help you learn to live again. I know what it's like to have social anxiety take complete control of your life. It has affected everything from my social life to my physical health. Believe it or not, I almost dropped out of high school because of it. I convinced myself that everyone hated me and could only concentrate on what others thought of me during my classes. I've lost friends because of it. I once refused to go to the hospital despite being very sick due to my crushing phobia of socialization. It took me passing out in the grocery store for me to get help. So when I say that I know what it's like to suffer from social anxiety, I mean it. It took me almost losing my fiancé to get help. Healing was painful and uncomfortable, and every setback made me want to fall back into old habits and fears. But I recovered. I wrote this book to share everything that I have learned and to help other people feel the relief that I have felt. What you'll learn. In the pages ahead, I will help you along your path to freedom and peace. First, we will define anxiety and what it means to you. We will identify some of the main causes of anxiety and their triggers, as well as how it manifests in different people. Next, we will learn how to develop tranquility of the mind and how to keep yourself calm in any situation through prayer and meditation, tools that were my best friend in my mental rehabilitation. Then we will gain an understanding of the relationship between food and anxiety and how certain foods can worsen anxiety. Additionally, we will touch on the value of exercise on your mind and body. Once we understand anxiety and its causes, we will be able to learn how to have self-confidence in any situation and how that will help deepen the relationships you have around you. We will learn what I think to be the most important tenet of conquering social anxiety: no self-criticism. I will help you gain the self-esteem we all need in order to recognize our value. Moreover, I will help you learn about the art of letting go, which is essential to recovery. Armed with all this knowledge, you will be ready to reclaim your life and get out in the world. Now that you know what you're getting into, it's time to make a choice. Do you want to stay complacent with your life and the anxiety that controls it? Or are you ready to heal the wounds that bind you and find peace once and for all? Once you are ready for your transformation, turn the page and get ready to start your new life. Chapter 1. Recognizing Anxiety. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, a person with social anxiety fears certain social situations, or more specifically, having to perform in public. This might happen in only a few social situations, or it could persist in almost all of them. The people there might be unfamiliar, or it might be that others are scrutinizing their performance. While it's normal to be anxious around people every so often, if it lasts for months and interferes with your way of life, at home, at school, or in other social situations, it becomes a mental health disorder. This disorder is called social anxiety disorder, SAD. Other general symptoms of social anxiety disorder include difficulty speaking, avoidance behavior, panic attacks, expecting the worst in social situations, excessive worrying, fear of judgment. Those with social anxiety may avoid eye contact, going to social gatherings, interacting with coworkers, scheduling doctor's appointments, or contacting their friends. Social anxiety can look different for every person. Let's look at some examples of the different ways social anxiety can manifest itself in different people. Raj. Raj has difficulty speaking in groups because he feels ashamed and embarrassed. He is unsure about how he presents himself. The result is that he expects others to judge him harshly. In an ironic twist, typically he judges himself more harshly than anyone else would. On top of this, even minor transgressions make him feel guilty. Johanna. Johanna feels strongly that she must avoid any situation where others will scrutinize her in public because she fears that her actions will cause embarrassment. Steve. Steve, a high school senior, sent off 10 applications to the colleges he wanted to attend. Naturally, he checked the mail every day. When he saw an envelope addressed to him from one of the colleges he had applied to, Steve immediately imagined a rejection letter inside. Between the time he saw the envelope and the time he opened it, he experienced extreme anxiety. As it turned out, he'd been admitted and had even been awarded a scholarship. Nevertheless, his cortex initiated an anxiety response by interpreting the sight of the envelope in a way that created distressing thoughts. Sam. Sam's girlfriend was severely injured in a car accident. She happened to be driving, and Sam was in the passenger seat. Now, if he has to ride in the passenger seat of a vehicle, Sam anxiously expects danger at every turn. Even if he just approaches the vehicle on the passenger side, he feels that this is a situation he must avoid. He does not experience flashbacks of the actual accident, simply the feelings the accident evoked. He always wants to be the one to drive, so he can avoid riding in that seat. The feelings are so jolting that he never questions if they are based on something real or not. Therefore, he has never considered that he might be able to change them. Monique and Jaden. Two women, Monique and Jaden, meet for dinner. They wait quite a while for their friend Josh to show up, but he never does. The difference in their reactions speaks volumes. Jaden experiences a rush of anger because she believes Josh should keep his word. Also, she suspects his actions show a lack of respect for her and her friend. Monique, on the other hand, does not seem to be bothered. She interprets the situation quite differently. Josh's absence gives her more time to catch up with her old friend Jaden. Therefore, she has nothing to feel angry about. Now that we have a general idea of social anxiety symptoms and how they can affect each individual differently, let's deep dive into the other many symptoms of social anxiety. Generally, these symptoms can be put into 3 categories: emotional, physical, and avoidance of. Here is an in-depth list of the wide variety of possible symptoms in all 3 categories. Emotional: worry and intense fear of social interactions. Constant replay of social interactions after they happen. Extreme fear of interacting with strangers. Expecting the worst in a social situation. Overanalyzing and pointing out flaws after a social interaction. Physical: sweating, shakiness, hyperventilation, blushing, inability to think properly, upset stomach, nausea, muscle tension, increased heartbeat. Avoidance of: interacting with unfamiliar people, eating in front of others, eye contact, going to work or school, asking for help, entering a room with people already in it, taking or making phone calls, attracting attention. Am I just shy? Social anxiety disorder is the most common anxiety disorder. It ranks only behind substance abuse disorder and depression as a mental disorder. Social anxiety disorder, or SAD, is as common in children as in adults, and an equal number of women and men have it. Worldwide, it occurs within 5 to 10% of the population. In the United States, about 7.1% of the population are affected, or 15 million people. Despite the high number of people with this disorder, many do not seek treatment. There are many reasons this is so, but one is that people believe that their fear of social situations is inborn. Maybe they are just shy. But shyness and social anxiety disorder are 2 very different things. It is important to note the distinction between the 2. Let's look at some key differences between shyness and social anxiety disorder. The number 1 difference between shyness and social anxiety is that shyness is a personality trait, and social anxiety is a mental disorder. Shyness can dissipate when one gets used to a new person or place, whereas a person with SAD can have anxiety that remains unchanged or worsens with familiarity. People with SAD are prone to pessimism and overanalyzing simple social interactions. Shy people are more optimistic and aren't anywhere near as self-critical. People who are shy may use solitude to recharge their social battery, but solitude only provides temporary relief for people with SAD. Both people with social anxiety disorder and shyness may not feel confident in their social skills. However, this perceived lack of social skills tends to come with an overwhelming fear of public humiliation among social anxiety sufferers. Shyness may cause the sufferer to have minor distress, but people with SAD suffer from extreme distress that impairs their day-to-day functionality because of their mental disorder. This extreme distress may also cause the physical manifestation of their distress in SAD sufferers. Now that you know the difference between social anxiety disorder and shyness, it is important to note that intense shyness can lead to social anxiety disorder in some cases. But generally, it is nowhere near the cause for concern as social anxiety. Simply put, shyness can complicate life. Social anxiety disorder can completely stop it in its tracks. Socially anxious or neurodivergent. Besides being mistaken for shyness, social anxiety can also be misdiagnosed for multiple neurodivergent disorders. Misdiagnosis of mental health disorders can be very detrimental to someone's health and well-being. When you are misdiagnosed with something and you try to use tools meant for something you might not even have, it can leave you feeling helpless and alone. It's like trying to treat a sprained ankle with a Band-Aid when you need an ankle brace. So what does it mean to be neurodivergent? Neurodivergence is a term used to describe when someone's brain processes, learns, and/or behaves differently than what is considered normal. Let's look at some common neurodivergent disorders that can be misdiagnosed for social anxiety. Autism spectrum disorder, ASD. Autism spectrum disorder, previously known as autism, is a neurodevelopmental disorder characterized by difficulties with social communication and interaction, and restricted and repetitive patterns in behaviors, interests, and activities. Here are the differences and similarities between social anxiety and autism spectrum disorder. The two disorders are quite different in origin. Autism is a neurodevelopmental condition, and SAD is a mental health condition. The shared symptoms of SAD and ASD include not liking unexpected changes to social plans and social avoidance. People with either of these disorders also have difficulty interacting with strangers, can be socially withdrawn, and may experience discomfort at large gatherings. Where they differ, however, is if you have autism spectrum disorder, you will most likely largely avoid eye contact or be slower to make eye contact, whereas if you suffer from SAD, you can probably make eye contact but will quickly move away. Another symptom specific to ASD is that people with the disorder might have special interests, difficulty reading social cues, sensory issues, or no desire to be social. This deviates from SAD because people may have a desire to be social, but their anxiety gets in the way. Someone with ASD may also self-soothe with repetitive behaviors or routines, have less social motivation, and work well on their own without negatively affecting their mental health. If you have SAD, you might find your anxiety manifesting in a physical form or having discomfort or fear associated with being the center of attention. Dyslexia and dyscalculia. Dyslexia is a learning disability characterized by difficulty reading. Dyscalculia is a learning disability that affects a person's ability to do basic arithmetic, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. A person may avoid reading and writing in front of people, which may be a symptom of social anxiety, but it stems from dyslexia. Similarly, a person may fear being called on in class, but the fear stems from the fact that they struggle with doing mathematics, not from social anxiety. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, ADHD. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder is marked by inattention and/or hyperactivity that interferes with functioning during everyday life. Many symptoms of ADHD overlap with the symptoms of SAD, including difficulty socializing. As I've mentioned before, individuals with social anxiety disorder can struggle with maintaining friendships and forming new ones due to fears about rejection. Similarly, someone with ADHD might have trouble maintaining friendships due to low impulse control and trouble picking up on social cues. Additionally, many people with ADHD struggle with object permanence, which is a fancy way of saying out of sight, out of mind, and this forgetfulness also extends to people, so even with the best intentions, they may fail to attend to important projects. Inattention. People with ADHD struggle with paying attention due to differences in the brain, whereas people with social anxiety disorder only seem not to be paying attention. But in reality, they are just distracted by worries about their social performance. Trouble completing tasks. People with social anxiety disorder may become stuck on a task and miss their deadlines because they are too anxious to ask other people for help. Those with ADHD mainly have trouble completing tasks due to poor planning skills and forgetfulness. Because of these similarities, ADHD may be diagnosed as social anxiety disorder and vice versa. Due to these similarities, people with ADHD and social anxiety disorder are only diagnosed with ADHD. It often takes outward behaviors like refusal to go to social events, sleeplessness, and/or shakiness to show that the undiagnosed social anxiety becomes evident. Overall, people with a neurodivergent disorder may share symptoms with someone with social anxiety disorder, which is why they may be misdiagnosed. It is important to note that people with the neurodivergent disorder may comorbidly have social anxiety disorder, as they are more likely to be bullied or suffer teasing from their peers, which is a main factor in anxiety developing, which we will talk about more in the next chapter. Anxiety isn't your friend. Anxiety is hard to treat. Why is this? Well, one of the main factors of this is that social anxiety can go unnoticed for a long time. As we have seen so far, it is easy to mistake social anxiety disorder for other disorders or shyness if you don't know their differences. Additionally, we might not recognize our anxiety as a problem until it has already caused a slew of problems in our life. And sometimes, even when we recognize anxiety, it can be hard to recognize it as a problem and not a motivator. Let's say, for instance, that going to family events triggers your social anxiety. It is easy to shrug off your discomfort and accept that anxiety comes with the territory of family. After all, whose family doesn't stress them out every once in a while? But when other symptoms show up, ones that are harder to ignore, speech becoming incoherent, Getting panicked and/or sweaty when a family member asks you about your job or your plans for the future, anxiety becomes a bigger problem. A problem that you may not know what to make of or how to solve. Sometimes we may use our anxiety as a motivator and therefore see it as a positive thing. Let's say you have to turn in an assignment for work. You know you need more time to adequately complete it in a way that demonstrates your ideas thoroughly. You know your boss. You also know that getting more time requires having a stressful conversation with your boss. If you turn the project in on time, your boss will only give you a few words of feedback in passing. You decide to rush the project to get it in on time. You would rather have the extra stress than the extra interaction with your boss. In this regard, social anxiety helped you make your deadline on time and avoid a stressful situation. Even standard anxiety can be a motivator. For instance, I've heard from numerous college students that they will wait until the very last minute to complete their assignments because they work better under pressure. This belief can be rewarded by the relief they feel after turning in the said assignment, especially if they get a decent grade on the rushed assignment. The same can be said for adults who get anxious about doing their taxes and wait until the last minute to complete them. Why put a lot of effort into completing things on time when you can put something together at the last minute and things turn out fine? The problem with relying on these habits is that it is easy to forget about all the downsides. Think about how much time you spent worrying about the deadline. How often did this worry get in the way of you enjoying other things in life? How many hours have you stared at the ceiling thinking about the consequences of not following through? How many times have your thoughts spiraled out of control because all you can think about is the deadline? I know, I've been there. Maybe you finally decided to take charge of all the unfinished tasks you have, unhappy with all the time you've wasted. Maybe you've caught yourself sighing, feeling frustrated, pondering the time it will take you to finish. You make a promise to yourself that the next time will be different. Next time, you'd do better and manage your time wisely. And maybe after, you find that the fruits of your labor aren't so sweet. You worry about this unhealthy pattern of behavior and how it will affect you when you have something important to do, something where the finished product needs to be exceptional, something that can't be haphazardly thrown together. What will you do when that happens? I included these examples to show how easy it is to see your social anxiety as something helpful, and how easy it is to overlook all of the negative results of not having your anxiety under control. Anxiety can indeed be helpful. In fact, that's the entire reason why anxiety developed in humans, although we'll talk about that more in Chapter 2. But there is a very fine line between using anxiety as a motivational tool and letting it completely control your life. If we ignore our anxiety, we may not see how it negatively interferes with our life and wreaks havoc. That is why it is important to recognize when we are anxious and the thoughts that lead to anxiousness. By now, you should have a better understanding of social anxiety and what it is, and especially what it isn't. In the next chapter, we will focus on what causes anxiety in the first place and the possible triggers to look out for. Before we move on, I want to take a moment to discuss some of the more unpalatable anxiety symptoms that not a lot of people talk about. Triggering social anxiety is not a difficult task. After all, most of us interact with people for the majority of the day in some capacity, and if you're not directly in front of someone worrying about what they think of you, then you're probably at home, worrying about the next time you have to interact with people again. The stress this cycle causes can make it incredibly easy to cause some pretty annoying side effects. It can make you irritable and lash out against the people around you. It can make you an unreliable friend. It's easy to forget to eat or eat too much due to stress, causing weight gain or loss. When you're in this situation, it's also alarmingly simple to neglect your personal hygiene. It's ironic. You would think that with social anxiety, something that makes you constantly worry about everyone judging you would always make you want to look your best. But oftentimes, the opposite is true. And when we neglect things like showering, brushing our teeth and hair, or washing our clothes, it makes us feel like crap, which further keeps us stuck in the cycle of shame and unhappiness. But having these more unfavorable symptoms of social anxiety is okay, as long as you recognize them for what they are and take control of them on your road to achieving peace. Now, I'm not trying to absolve you of any personal blame for any pain or hurt you might cause. I'm simply trying to destigmatize these symptoms. Having these symptoms doesn't make you gross or less of a human being. In fact, having anxiety is one of the most human things to have. Chapter 2. But why am I like this? So here's the thing. You're actually supposed to be anxious. In fact, I'd be worried that you weren't human if you didn't have any form of anxiety. Now, I know what you're thinking, but didn't you just say that we were the ones responsible not to let anxiety take over our lives? Well, yes, that's true. But hear me out. As we evolved, humans with traits favorable to survival are the ones that lived and passed their genes on to the next generation, and so on and so forth. Let's say you were an ancient human. If you happened to be alert and vigilant, you would likely survive longer than the other humans without those traits. So what exactly does that have to do with anxiety? Well, think about what happens when you have a panic attack. Oftentimes, it's incredibly hard to calm down because your brain is focusing on so many details at once. Sound familiar? You see, all of the hypervigilant traits that have been passed down through thousands of generations have led to the modern-day human fear response. This response is more commonly referred to as the flight, fight, or freeze response. This response is biologically hardwired into our bodies, and anxiety is a key part of this process. Our fear response happens in a part of the brain called the amygdala. When people experience a surge of anxiety, the brain's focus is directed toward the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is supposed to calm the reaction to anxiety by assessing the problem calmly and rationally, and then sending signals to the amygdala to calm down. However, in people with social anxiety disorder, the prefrontal cortex amplifies the activity of the amygdala instead of calming it. This can cause a disproportionate anxiety response to a small obstacle. This is because, for people with SAD, our brains will perceive something like a social interaction to be as dangerous as, say, fighting off a wild animal. This is the reason for the physiological reactions to anxiety, an overactive flight, fight, or freeze response. Now that we know that physical anxiety manifestations result from our body responding to a perceived threat, let's learn how our fear response is responsible for different physical symptoms of social anxiety. Symptom: dizziness. This sensation can be chalked up to our bodies taking in too much oxygen. When our bodies are faced with an imagined threat, they will take in excess oxygen to prepare the muscles to flee from danger. Symptom: upset stomach. The symptoms of an upset stomach, nausea, queasiness, vomiting, are largely caused by blood flow being redirected to other parts of the body. Food digestion is the last of your worries if you are about to fight for your life. Symptom: increased perspiration. The rush of adrenaline activates the sweat glands. The body sweats to expel heat. It also makes it easier to slip away from predators. Symptom: heart racing. When in danger, your heart will beat faster to supply more oxygenated blood to your vital organs in preparation for battle. Symptom: difficulty in concentration. This is caused by decreased blood flow to the head, as blood flow goes to the muscles required for survival, such as your arms or legs. Symptom: blurred vision. Your pupils may dilate in order to better see danger, which often causes your eyes to be extra sensitive to stimuli in your field of vision. Symptom: feeling of shakiness. Your body releases a hormone known as epinephrine, more commonly known as adrenaline, to help you escape danger. This hormone is why your blood is directed to muscles to power them up for a fight. This increased blood flow to your muscles can leave you feeling shaky. Our fear response is driven by the amygdala, which is thought to be the core of the neural system formation, responsible for processing threatening or fearful stimuli. An overactive amygdala can also cause something else that is common with social anxiety sufferers. This is an imbalance of certain chemicals, known as neurotransmitters, in your brain. These neurotransmitters are adrenaline, serotonin, dopamine, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, aka GABA. Adrenaline is responsible for a lot of the physiological responses to anxiety, as it is responsible for kickstarting the fear response we mentioned before. It is usually increased in tandem with cortisol when our stress response is triggered. Serotonin is a mood stabilizer that regulates virtually all behavioral responses, including but not limited to mood, memory and perception, and fear, as well as other non-behavioral responses, such as sleep, circadian rhythm, emesis, and body temperature. Dopamine plays a role in bodily functions such as movement, memory, and pleasurable reward and motivation. Therefore, it is responsible for allowing you to feel motivation, pleasure, and satisfaction. Gamma-aminobutyric acid produces a calming effect. This neurotransmitter is responsible for calming down the amygdala when it is active. So, a lack of GABA can cause you to be unable to calm down when your fear response is triggered, which, as we explained earlier, can pose a big issue with your mental health. Many things can cause this imbalance of neurotransmitters, with a common reason being trauma. It is important to understand the root causes of our social anxiety to identify our triggers better. There are a lot of important questions to ask yourself in order to do this. What is your most prominent trigger? When did your symptoms start? Do you remember a time before you had social anxiety? What causes it to be more manageable? What exacerbates it? Most of these questions can be found by looking into our past, specifically the type of trauma you have experienced in your life. Emotions, responses, and the trauma they come from. Emotions are complicated. Everyone has them, but no two people will ever react to their emotions in the same way, and no two people have the same reasons for what they do. Yes, we all have the same ingrained fear response, and all of us have had our emotions manifest in us physically. Still, everyone has their unique story, particular triggers, and past experiences that affect the severity and frequency of their emotions. Each person's emotional strengths are like snowflakes. Each one entirely unique. Some will crumble before they ever reach the surface, and some will remain strong as they hurtle towards the hard concrete ground. To understand your emotions, you need to look at your past and ask yourself, where did you come from? Did you come from a large family? One where you were constantly surrounded by people who seemed to have an instinctive confidence in their everyday social interactions? Maybe you came from a single-parent household, one where your parent worked themselves to the bone to put a roof over your head and food on the table, where the stress of having your basic needs met left little room to suffer from anything else. One where a little shyness wasn't a big deal compared to the other all-consuming issues in your life. Everyone has experiences that shape them as a child, and everyone, no matter how good their life may seem, has had trauma in their life. A traumatic event is an event or series of events that cause a lot of stress. These events are characterized by a sense of horror, helplessness, serious injury, or the threat of serious injury or death, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Everyone has experienced some form of trauma in their lifetime. It is a universal experience. However, some people experience more traumatic events or trauma of more severity. This is not to say that one person's trauma is worse than someone else's, as other factors can affect how a person responds to trauma. Experiencing trauma is one of the main causes of social anxiety, especially if this trauma happens at a young age. I will give examples of traumatic events and possible triggers for each specific trauma type. Keep in mind that, because trauma is so broad, this list will not be anywhere near a comprehensive list of all possible traumas that can lead to anxiety. One of the most common forms of trauma that can lead to developing social anxiety disorder is being a victim of bullying. One study from 2010 found that higher teasing scores were significantly related to increased social anxiety, depression, stress, and greater impairment in functioning. Bullying often includes repeated shaming and public humiliation, so it's not a surprise that it could potentially cause social anxiety disorder, especially if the bullying started at a young age. People who have been bullied will often believe they will experience embarrassment similar to the embarrassment they felt from bullying over and over again. This leaves bullying victims especially vulnerable to triggers such as being criticized, being the center of attention, or any situation in which they have to perform. They can see every interaction with another human being as potential ammunition against them. Whereas someone who suffered from bullying might have had a problem being around too many people, those who have had isolated upbringings have the opposite problem. People who grew up with overprotective parents or in isolation often have issues understanding social cues and other nonverbal communication that may seem obvious to the rest of us. It makes sense. How is someone supposed to learn all the nuances of communication if they're hardly ever around other people? People who have had an unusually sheltered or isolated childhood may have difficulty going to new places, dating, and making small talk. A potentially large source of trauma in life is not having all of your needs met as a child. A child might not have their physical needs met, food, shelter, water, if they have suffered through food or housing insecurity. A child's emotional needs are just as important and can cause as much damage as physical needs if they are lacking. Your emotional needs might not have been met as a child if you had unreliable support systems, or if your parents were emotionally neglectful or had a detached parenting style. Individuals who have suffered through this type of trauma often have the most issues with eating or drinking in public, using public restrooms, and interacting with authority figures. People who have experienced abuse also have a high risk of developing social anxiety disorder. Abuse including, but not limited to, sexual, emotional, physical, financial, elderly, and discriminatory abuse, as well as domestic abuse, are all types of abuse that one can endure. These individuals often have multiple comorbid disorders as a result of their abuse. This means that they have multiple mental health conditions simultaneously. These other mental health issues can further exacerbate their social anxiety disorder, and vice versa. The abuse they suffered can make the following triggers especially upsetting: social gatherings, meeting new people, stating their opinion, voicing their needs, and public speaking. Other causes of social anxiety. Besides trauma, other factors can lead to social anxiety, including genetic inheritance. This means that if you have a family member with social anxiety disorder, you are at risk of inheriting the disorder. Having a family member with social anxiety can also make it so that you develop the disorder in response to trauma rather than developing something else. Along with the genetic component, being around people with social anxiety as a child can make SAD a learned behavior. People who inherited or learned social anxiety aren't specifically sensitive to any triggers. Their triggers can vary greatly. Societal expectations can also be a cause of SAD. This risk factor is especially relevant today with social media and the internet. If a person is on social media for long periods each day, it can cause many issues like stress and anxiety. Social media is a setting in which it is easy to compare yourself with others. Your trauma is valid whether you identify with one type of trauma listed or more than one traumatic event. Yes, it could always be worse. There's always someone out there who has it worse than you, who doesn't have the privilege of accessing the information in this book, or doesn't know how common social anxiety is, or what it even is. It's okay to acknowledge that what you went through wasn't okay. It's okay to accept that you might have a social anxiety disorder. Maybe you're like me. I used to think that because I was in a first world country, because I wasn't dying of starvation, because I wasn't an orphan or dying of some rare disease, that it wasn't okay to struggle, that I shouldn't be complaining. The truth is, you don't have to identify with any of the issues I've talked about to suffer from social anxiety disorder. Sometimes these things just happen. Sometimes our thoughts and feelings get stuck in an endless cycle of pain and suffering that eventually leads to what was once just a little bit of shyness to a full-on anxiety disorder. The three-component model of cognitive behavioral therapy. To understand the thought processes that can cause social anxiety to develop, we will look at a model used in cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a common therapy used to treat social anxiety and many other mental disorders. This therapy aims to help you identify and explore how your emotions and thoughts affect your actions. Specifically, helping you learn how to recognize negative or unhelpful thought and behavior patterns. The foundation of cognitive behavioral therapy is based on the idea that there are three components that make up our emotional experience: thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. These components are interconnected and directly affect each other. Let's break down exactly what each of these components represents in the model. Thoughts. Thoughts refer to how our brain makes sense of situations. Our thoughts can take a number of different forms, such as words, sentences, explicit ideas, and other nonverbal forms, such as mental images or vague impressions. Thoughts are the running commentary we hear in our minds throughout our lives. Emotions and feelings. Although usually used synonymously with each other, emotions and feelings have distinct differences. Emotions are the conscious mental reactions we experience strongly, usually followed by physical reactions. The term feelings refers to the physiological changes that occur due to different emotions. As we've discussed, our fear response can cause us to have many different physical symptoms as a result of feeling anxiety. Our bodies have many different physiological reactions in response to our emotions, not just when we're anxious. Anger can make your muscles tense and your face flushed. Sadness can cause you to cry or have higher skin conductance. Behaviors. Behaviors are what we do, the actions we take, and how we conduct ourselves. Just as importantly, behaviors are the things we don't do. For example, not going to a planned social event with friends is a behavior where we don't do something. On the other hand, someone who is having a good day might have the confidence to seek out interaction with their friend. Each of these components interacts with the others to create your moods and emotional patterns. Changing your emotional pattern is the key to breaking the cycle of anxious thoughts. But to do this, we must first understand how each component interacts with the next. Then we can attempt to change one component, creating a chain reaction that changes the others. How thoughts impact feelings and behaviors. Jenna has suffered from social anxiety on and off for most of her adult life. She suffered from bullying throughout most of her childhood. Because of this, she is especially anxious when she is the center of attention and when she is in a position where she needs to correctly use and know all of the correct social cues in that situation. Jenna has a project she needs to present at a meeting in front of her bosses and most of her coworkers today. She spent most of the night thinking that she would sound stupid in front of the other employees because she doesn't have confidence in her competency within the workplace. This has caused her to worry and get increasingly nervous the closer the presentation gets. Because of her overwhelming worry and nervousness, she stumbles around her words when speaking during most of the presentation and drops the laser pointer she is using multiple times. Due to this, she then leaves work early and calls out sick the next day. In this situation, it is clear that Jenna's thinking led to a negative chain reaction with her feelings and behaviors. Jenna's thoughts that she would sound stupid in front of her peers caused her emotional response of nervousness and worry, which in turn caused her to stumble around her words and have sweaty hands that make it hard to keep the laser pointer in hand. This all resulted in her leaving work early and calling out sick the upcoming day, cementing her worry that she wasn't good enough for her job and that her peers would look down on her. How feelings impact behaviors and thoughts. Jamie has recently found out that their daughter suffers from social anxiety just like they do. Jamie feels guilty and sad, causing intense fatigue and a higher heart rate. Throughout their day at work, her usual anxiety has increased, causing thoughts like, "It is my fault she suffers from anxiety," and "I poison everything around me." Feeling frustrated and alone, Jamie engages in the behavior of not getting much work done and avoiding any potential social interaction. Once she gets home, she has unusually dark thoughts when having dinner with her partner and her daughter, including, "They would be better off without me," and that she deserves to be alone for the rest of her life. Jamie was quiet for most of the meal and felt sullen and lonely. Sadness and guilt are not unexpected feelings to have when you find out your kid is suffering from the same things you did. It's a difficult and painful thing to learn. In this scenario, Jamie allowed this guilt and sadness to cast a dark shadow over the rest of her day. Their feelings over their child bled into her feelings about work and her romantic relationship. Because she has strong feelings of sorrow, her thoughts were affected by sorrow, no matter where she went. As a result, she withdrew herself from important activities at work and from connecting with her family during dinner time. By detaching from important areas in her life, she also laid the foundation to feel even worse, ensuring the cycle of negative emotions continued. How behaviors impact feelings and thoughts. Scott is one of the multiple people in his family that suffer from social anxiety disorder. He has gotten panic attacks in times of high social anxiety levels his whole life. When he has a panic attack, he feels lightheaded, nauseous, and tightness in his chest. He has learned to remove himself from whatever anxiety-inducing situation that caused him to have a panic attack, often going home or retreating to the bathroom. This behavior has caused him to miss a significant amount of time from his classes, and now he has fallen far behind in his studies. When he thinks about how far behind he is and all the work he needs to do to get back on track in school, he feels a surge of anxiety, and his panic symptoms further the cycle. He has also recently begun to feel that he will lose control and go crazy if he cannot escape to somewhere private when he experiences a panic attack. In this scenario, Scott's reaction to his feelings is the major source of the problem. Panic attacks aren't fun and aren't easy to deal with, but they won't cause him to go crazy or lose control. His primary coping skill is to avoid and escape the situation, but this reaction only furthers the thought that panic attacks are dangerous and a threat. Ironically, this type of behavior only causes more panic attacks. Suppose he were to flip the switch on his reaction to panic by writing out the panic attacks during class. In that case, he could find that his panic attacks aren't long-lasting. They last from only a few seconds to a maximum of a couple of minutes. And they don't cause him to go insane or lose control. Additionally, it's more likely that no one will notice his panic attack was even happening. But because his behavior doesn't allow him to test the truth of this evidence, he feels trapped in the seemingly never-ending cycle of panic and escapism. As you can see, without recognizing and distinguishing between thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, it is incredibly difficult to manage your mood and act beneficially, breaking or hindering the social anxiety cycle. Next, we will further break down each of these components in order to be able to stay calm throughout any experience or challenge we may face. Chapter 3: Fostering Inner Tranquility in Times of Chaos. Let's face it, we are living in unpredictable times, and it's hard not to freak out. It's even harder when your head screams at you every waking moment, telling you that you can't handle it. It can be hard to stay calm when your head is just an endless loop of shame and fear. It can be hard to remember that there was ever a time when you felt peace in your life. But it's possible, hard and sometimes exhausting, but still not impossible. The doomsday thought processes of people with anxiety. People with social anxiety often share a few similar destructive thought processes. One of the destructive thought processes that come out whenever we have overwhelming anxiety can be summarized in 3 statements or predictions. Something bad is going to happen. It will be catastrophic when this bad thing happens. I will be unable to cope. This thought process directly leads to a thought process known as catastrophizing. This is when we immediately jump to a negative conclusion, assuming that the worst-case scenario will happen, or reacting to the situation as if it was the end of the world. Example: if I don't go to this work meeting, I will lose my job. If I lose my job, then I will not be able to pay my bills, and I will be homeless for the rest of my life. Let's look at some common unhelpful thoughts that can make you feel more anxious. Remember, this list didn't come from nowhere. There are plenty of people that struggle with these types of unhelpful thinking. If they seem familiar, that's okay. You are not alone. Black and white thinking. This thought process happens when you think in absolutes, thinking that there is only good or bad, leaving no room for gray areas in the middle. Example: if I don't answer every phone call I get from my sister, I am a bad sister. Overgeneralization, where you apply the outcome of one situation to all other events. Example: she doesn't want to be my friend anymore. No one will ever stay friends with me long term. Labeling. This is a form of overgeneralizing. We label when we make blanket statements about people or situations based on specific circumstances, such as the outcome or quality of an event. Example: I was late to work one day this week. I am a bad employee. Shoulding and musting. This is a type of black and white thinking. It involves thoughts such as, I must do everything right, or I should be better at this. With this type of thinking, you beat yourself up about what was or was not done. Example: telling yourself, I shouldn't have said that. Emotional reasoning. This is where you draw conclusions based on emotions. You forget about the irrationality of emotion and take your feelings as truth. Example: I am uncomfortable and flustered, so I must have made a mistake. Mind reading. You assume what others are thinking, usually about you. Example: he looked away when I was talking to him. He is annoyed and doesn't want to talk to me. Personalizing. Personalizing involves blaming yourself or someone else for events outside anyone's control. Whether the blame lies with a person or not, you believe external events are entirely your or someone else's fault. Example: my group got a bad grade for our final project. It is my fault. Predicting the future. This involves predictive thinking or fortune-telling. Example: I will embarrass myself at my family's holiday party. We are often unaware of the thought processes that lurk behind the scenes. On the other hand, we can be fully aware of our unhealthy thought processes. Either way, every time social anxiety gets in the way of you living your life, one or more of these types of thinking is behind it. It is important to be aware of these thought processes as we go through life because how we think greatly impacts our anxiety and how intense it is. Paying attention to the relationship between our thoughts and feelings is vital to recovery and achieving peace of mind. This is because, with practice, we can learn to improve our recognition of anxious beliefs and thought processes, challenge them, and change how we react to them. Using meditation and mindfulness. Although meditation has sometimes been rebranded as mindfulness in recent times, the two are very distinct from each other. Mindfulness is just a way to integrate meditation into our daily lives. Before we get into what meditation is, I first want to take a moment to clarify what meditation is not. Meditation is not a way to clear the mind and empty it of any thoughts. The goal is not to create a blank space in our heads. Many people I've recommended meditation to have said it isn't for them. I've heard many excuses, such as, "My mind is too busy, I can never clear my thoughts when I meditate," or, "I tried meditation, but it's impossible for me. My thoughts never stop." All of these people have failed to meditate because they are under the illusion that meditation is supposed to provide them with a blank, empty mind. Achieving this is nearly impossible. The more we force our thoughts away, the louder they come back. Trying to silence our thoughts is the mental version of trying to hold your breath and suffocate. Using meditation like this will only inflame the very fight or flight system we are trying to soothe. The goal of meditation is to change our relationships with our thoughts. Inner peace means to end the war with our thoughts, not go completely blank. Meditation is about giving our minds the freedom to find the space within our thoughts rather than freedom from them. Practicing meditation is achieved by setting aside a short period of time to sit down in a quiet place. There are multiple techniques in different meditation exercises. Some focus on the body, which is an easy place to start as the body is very tangible. Another technique is to focus on our breathing, something more subtle than our body. Some techniques use the senses through sound or visual aid. All of these are known meditation supports, things that provide a focus for our attention and a place for our minds to return to when they wander. There is no perfect formula to follow to practice meditation, but there are some recommendations to get the most out of your meditation session. Ideally, your session should take place in a quiet area. It doesn't need to be fully silent, which is almost impossible to achieve, but it should at the very least feel relaxingly quiet. Posture is also important to be aware of when meditating because, as we know, the body and mind are very connected. The traditional position for meditation is to sit cross-legged on the floor. Others prefer to sit on a chair for more support. But the main idea is to have a straight back. Whether or not you are using a visual aid, your eyes can be open or shut. I prefer to keep mine shut in order to avoid getting distracted. If keeping your eyes closed makes you feel sleepy or tired, feel free to keep your eyes open. Again, there is no specific formula you need to follow. Some people like background music or some kind of audio track. For a beginner, the ideal amount of time to start with when meditating is up to 10 minutes. Once meditation becomes something you are used to, you can keep extending this time up to 30 minutes. The best time to meditate for people with social anxiety is in the morning. Cortisol, which we know is part of the stress response, spikes in the morning to help our bodies wake up. Meditating in the morning balances the cortisol level, helping your anxiety levels stay low during the day. 2 meditation exercises for anxiety. The 5-5-5. This exercise is ideal for when you can feel a social anxiety-induced panic attack coming on, and it only takes 1 to 5 minutes. It is similar to taking a shot of espresso, only this espresso gives you a shot of calming energy. Take 5 slow breaths, slowly inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your nose. Next, take 5 more slow breaths, inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. Finally, take 5 more slow breaths, inhaling through your mouth and exhaling through your mouth. Once finished, continue breathing normally and note how your energy has shifted. Leave it at the door. This meditation requires you to take stock of each piece of clothing you have on and how it makes you feel. This exercise is good to use after a long or bad day of work, school, or just a long day in general. Sit cross-legged with your hands relaxed on your lap. Inhale deeply through your nose and audibly through your mouth. With each breath, imagine each stress from the day sinking into the floor, leaving your body and the space around you. Continue at a slow and steady pace, focusing on the stress leaving your body with every exhalation. Do this for a few minutes as needed. Now imagine a large, heavy door in front of you. Imagine opening this door as you take a deep breath through your nose. As you exhale, you walk through the door and leave it shut behind you. With this, you leave all of the stress behind the shut door, complaints from your boss, back-to-back traffic on your drive to and from work, and the anxiety of interacting with everyone all day. Finish the meditation with a few cleansing breaths. This meditation is great for days that are especially emotionally taxing, days where you find yourself stretched too thin. It should only take a few minutes to complete. Now let's talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness is imperative when it pertains to social anxiety. A big part of being anxious is convincing yourself that your fearful feelings are valid. What being mindful brings to the table is the ability to bring yourself back to reality in times of stress. It can also serve as a tool to validate your thoughts and feelings. So what exactly is mindfulness? Mindfulness is centered around maintaining awareness of our thoughts, feelings, physical sensations, and the surrounding environment. In this mindset, we don't look at emotions and thoughts as good or bad. We acknowledge what we are feeling or thinking and we move on without scrutinizing or judging them. Many of us with social anxiety tend to get stuck on autopilot, where we are always one step ahead of ourselves, preparing for tomorrow and forgetting today. This would be anxiety-inducing for anybody, let alone someone with an anxiety disorder. By making it a point to live in the moment, you've already made a big step in the right direction. As you use mindfulness in your daily life, it is key to pay attention to your feelings. It is far too easy to feel one thing and mistake it for another, which is dangerous in the case of social anxiety disorder. This idea of stopping to acknowledge your thoughts is helpful in times of high anxiety. To exemplify this idea, imagine a conversation with a close friend. You want to mention something to them, but worry about how they might react. You think, I should be able to talk to them without being this nervous, but it doesn't work. What if they think you're weird? What if you sound stupid? What if they judge you and decide not to be friends with you anymore? These thoughts spiral, and you pass up an opportunity to bond with a friend. This leaves you more anxious than ever, and you are more likely to have a meaningful conversation with them in the future. Consider that you are having the same conversation with a friend. When you think about mentioning something you want to talk about, you start worrying about what they might think. But this time, you recognize the anxious thought spiral for what it is. You consider the facts. When has this friend ever given you any inclination that they think you're weird? That they're judging you? That they don't want to hear what you have to say? In fact, when you think about it, you remember them telling you how nervous they get around you. You remember how pleased they are when you speak your mind. With this thought process, you are able to look at the facts and disprove the imagined negative reactions. This time, you speak up. This sparks a jovial conversation that leaves both you and your friend closer and happier than ever with each other. In both cases, the scenario is the same, but in one, we catastrophize, think with shoulds and musts, as well as mind reading, letting our anxious thoughts get the better of us. In the other, we stop, reevaluate, and proceed after reaching a logical conclusion. In many instances, especially for those of us with social anxiety disorder, our minds will start to explore awful things that could or will happen to us, despite our best efforts to remain calm. These thoughts will demand our attention and keep us in a never-ending loop that takes our thoughts off the deep end. This way of thinking highlights the importance of our own awareness of our thoughts and feelings, as well as the facts we know to be true. Sometimes, when we take the time to analyze worst-case scenarios, we realize that our fears are entirely unfounded. When I find anxious thoughts popping up, I try to react to them as I would if I see someone I vaguely recognize. I'm sure we've all been there, going about your day when you see someone you think you might recognize. Maybe you realize it's an ex-boyfriend from high school, a coworker from an old job, or someone you used to play kickball with as a kid. I like to summarize the things that happen when I see someone I used to know in 3 steps. Recognize, say bye, and carry on. Step 1. Recognize. When you first see someone you vaguely recognize, your first thought is to figure out where you knew them. Did we go to the same high school? No, that's not right. An old neighbor, maybe? No. Oh, I remember. We used to be lab partners in the biology lab I took in college. Do the same things with your anxious thoughts. Think of the categories of unhealthy thinking that we outlined before. Are you labeling, overgeneralizing, trying to predict the future? From there, you can ask yourself questions to see if the thought is justified or productive. Here are some possible questions you might ask yourself based on the thought processes we identified earlier. Black and white thinking. Is there any other way I could see this particular situation? Are there any options between the two extremes? Overgeneralization. Have there been times in my life where this didn't happen? Does one experience mean that every other experience will be the same? Labeling. Does one event define me? Are there other experiences in my life that do not support this label? Shoulding and musting. Does beating myself up change or help the situation? Is my thought just a rule I apply to myself that I don't apply to anyone else? Emotional reasoning. What pieces of information do I have to support this? Has a specific feeling I've had ever led me astray before? Mind reading. What proof do I have that the person is thinking that thought? Have I suddenly developed the skill to read minds? Personalizing. How do I know this is about myself? What evidence do I have that I am at fault for this outcome? Predicting the future. Have my predictions ever been true? How does attempting to predict the future help me in this situation? Step 2. Say bye. After I recognize someone, what happens next is always dependent on who exactly I see, but it always ends the same. There is always a goodbye. And the same thing applies to your thoughts. After you recognize that you're thinking an unhealthy thought, say goodbye and let it go. If there wasn't adequate evidence to support your thought, let go of it. If it's not a productive thought, let go of it. If a thought isn't helpful to you, it doesn't deserve your time and energy. Step 3. Carry on. Once you've let go of an unhelpful thought, proceed with a more helpful or productive thought. You can come up with this new thought by using the answers from the questions you asked about the original thought. In a nutshell, if an emotion changes, recognize, what am I thinking? Identify which unhealthy thought process your thought belongs to. Question and evaluate the data surrounding that thought. Say bye. What is a more productive thought? Carry on. You don't need to be panicking to practice mindfulness. Remind yourself as you go through the day that you are okay right now. When we let our thoughts travel to the future, we panic and plan. When we let them move into the past, we regret and resent. Allow yourself to be in the present moment and ask yourself, are you mostly okay? Can you breathe all right? Is your heart beating? Is your mind working? The answers are almost certainly yes. In daily life, it is not impossible to feel this fundamental sense of all rightness, even when completing tasks. When you do this, you aren't ignoring any real threats or problems or pretending that your life is perfect. It's definitely not. But when you're in the midst of your day, you can usually see that in the moment you are okay right now. Multiple times a day, acknowledge to yourself that you are okay. You may want more confidence or reassurance, or maybe just more salt on your food. Maybe you want to be less anxious all the time. Maybe you want less pain or loneliness. But underneath all of your desires and to-do lists is an awareness that you are okay this second. If you're driving home from work, notice, I'm okay. I'm okay. As you put your child to bed, notice, I'm okay. I'm okay. As you're shooting off an email, notice, I'm all right. I'm okay. Settling into this basic sense of all rightness is a strong way to build the well-being and resources your brain needs to combat your socially anxious thoughts. You are allowing yourself to see the truth. Chapter 4. Food is our friend, and so is exercise. I'm sure we've all heard the phrase, you are what you eat, at some point in our lives. This phrase gained popularity because it is an important and very truthful message. Simply put, if you put junk in your body, you will feel like junk. On the flip side, if you eat food that nourishes and strengthens your body, you will feel nourished and strengthened. This is especially true when we are talking about people with anxiety. Now, the basics of taking care of your body are still the same. Eat your fruits and veggies, manage sugar intake, and limit carbs. However, when it comes to excessively anxious people, there are some important nuances that come into play. When people are constantly in a state of stress, it is common for them to take the easiest path to get from point A to point B, which often means overindulging in fast food or microwavable meals. This type of eating won't make these people feel better and can actually make them feel much worse. Because let's face it, when have you ever eaten at McDonald's and felt better afterward? That's why, for people with anxiety, or any high amount of stress for that matter, it is necessary to pay extra attention to what you eat and sometimes take extra steps to ensure what you are eating is helping and not harming you. Diet is a subject rife with various claims and opinions and confusion. Food is a loaded topic on its own. Everyone has some opinion about what you should or should not put in your body. People often argue about what's good to eat and what's bad to eat. This obsession with food and healthy eating has even caused people to develop an eating disorder known as orthorexia, which is a disorder marked by a fixation on clean eating. People with this disorder often set rules for themselves on what they can and can't eat, causing them to eliminate many food ingredients and sometimes even entire food groups. Other concerns can come into play when you think of eating, as we are in a time when environmental concerns are talked about all the time, which makes some people try to eat locally, reduce or completely eliminate their meat intake, as well as choose foods that have less packaging and reduce food waste. Besides environmentalism, there is the ethical concern of going vegan for humane reasons and the worry of exploitative labor practices within the food industry. In other words, the effort of deciding what or how to eat can trigger a whole plethora of emotions, some of which can cause anxiety. To be clear, I am not writing this chapter to convince you of the benefits of some fad diet or to tell you that certain foods are bad and that you should avoid them at all costs. Food is important. It is required for your survival. It is a basic human need that is essential to our physical and mental health, mental cognition, and our emotional well-being. Throughout this chapter, I will challenge you not to think of food in terms of good or bad, but to see food as a means to meet the nutritional needs that our bodies require to function properly. You shouldn't feel guilty eating the foods you love, even if said food doesn't top the healthy foods list. There is no perfect diet, no food plan that will rid you of your anxiety. We are simply using food as a tool to manage our anxiety, not control it. The gut microbiome. The gut microbiome is not a new concept by any means, but it is something that the medical community has recently taken a great deal of interest in. Your body's response to what you eat largely depends on the gut microbiome, which makes understanding what it does and ensuring its health very important. Now, I'm sure that with a name like the microbiome, it may seem like a complicated concept that only highly educated people could understand, but that couldn't be further from the truth. The microbiome is a community of microorganisms, such as fungi, bacteria, and viruses, that exists in a particular environment. In humans, the term is often used to describe the microorganisms that live in or on a particular part of the body, such as the skin, or in this case, our gastrointestinal tract. The gut biome is also commonly referred to as the digestive or gastrointestinal biome. The gut biome holds a community of more than 100 trillion microorganisms that reside in varying degrees in the gastrointestinal tract. The gastrointestinal tract is the pathway through which food is taken in and leaves the body. This part of the body includes the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, stomach, small and large intestines, and the anus. As I said, this complex ecosystem contains trillions of microorganisms, such as fungi, bacteria, and viruses. Usually, when we think of these words, we don't connect them with good health. I'm sure we all learned about washing our hands to get rid of bacteria, but this is a simplified view of these microorganisms. Most of the bacteria in and on our bodies are helping us. Bacteria want us to be healthy so they can grow and flourish too. Humans have always intuited a strong link between the mind and the gut. We have gut feelings and gut reactions. We might refer to our emotional state as gutted when deeply disappointed or sad. As we learned in the previous chapters, having an upset stomach, which can include nausea, vomiting, and queasiness, is not uncommon when experiencing a large amount of anxiety. But our gut is responsible for so much more than this. When beneficial microbes outweigh the harmful ones, they manage the human body's daily operations. Microbes break down food into smaller components that the body uses for various other functions. They produce amino acids the building blocks of protein, which is part of almost every bodily function. They help protect our immune system against harmful microbes and other intruders. Vitamins that are needed for nerve functions, B vitamins, as well as others needed for blood clotting, vitamin K, are produced here. They create the conditions required in the brain that affect our memory function, our ability to think and perform complex tasks, and how we feel and behave. Many studies indicate there is communication to and from the gut and the brain. Messages sent back and forth using the body's neurons via the intestinal nervous system and the bloodstream occurs almost instantly, in a matter of milliseconds. This communication is invaluable to our survival. It lets us know when we've eaten enough or not enough. And when we eat something unfavorable, such as a pathogen or a toxin, the gut immediately sends messages to the brain so that our bodies can expel it via vomiting or diarrhea. The messages influence your mood, circadian rhythms, sleep patterns, and most importantly, your response to stress. All of us are born with a microbiome made up of the bacteria given to us in utero and from our mothers. As you breathe and grow, try new foods, go outside, cuddle with your dog or cat, or shake a stranger's hand, you pick up new microbiome passengers. Every interaction with your environment, no matter how big or small, has the power to change your microbiome, some subtly and some more drastically. This area is where we have the power to change our microbiome and help good bacteria flourish. Anxiety and our microbiome. Remember that stress response we talked about in Chapter 2? Turns out, the gut microbiome actually plays a big role in that. There is a reason that the gut microbiome is often referred to as our second brain. This second brain plays such a noticeable role in the conditions of our body that it has now played a prominent role in new approaches to mental health. The composition and diversity of our gut microbiome, plus how our gut communicates with our brain, can affect your risk of developing depression, anxiety, and other mood disorders. Remember those neurotransmitters that are instrumental in helping us manage our moods, and therefore our anxiety? Without a biodiverse microbiome, it is much harder to balance them. Studies have found that the microbiome's diversity is directly related to the severity of the patient's mental health. As I mentioned in Chapter 2, there are 4 main neurotransmitters that, when imbalanced, can be a big cause of anxiety due to their role in our stress response. As a refresher, these neurotransmitters are adrenaline, serotonin, dopamine, and gamma-aminobutyric acid, aka GABA. Our gut microbiome plays a large role in keeping the levels of these neurotransmitters in our bodies balanced. In fact, a whopping 95% of serotonin is manufactured in the digestive tract through the work of microbes. To be clear, serotonin isn't something that you can get directly from your food. Tryptophan, which you can get from food, is an amino acid that's converted to serotonin in the brain. Foods that contain a large amount of this amino acid include peanuts, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, spinach, parsley, watercress, a leafy green, cremini mushrooms, bamboo shoots, asparagus, as well as chicken, turkey, eggs, and organic dairy. Dopamine is also something that you can't get directly from food. This neurotransmitter is converted in the body from the amino acid tyrosine. Foods rich in tyrosine include seeds, nuts, lentils, egg whites, grass-fed meat, fish, chicken, shrimp, organic dairy, and soy products. GABA is considered a dietary neurotransmitter because it is a neurotransmitter that is possible to obtain directly from food. Foods that contain this neurotransmitter are beans, lentils, citrus fruits, fish, broccoli, tomatoes, potatoes, and berries. It is also present in some of our beverages, such as tea, especially green tea. Fermented foods like kimchi and sauerkraut can also contain this neurotransmitter. Note, several of the complex B vitamins, such as thiamine, riboflavin, niacin, vitamin B6, and vitamin B12, are needed as cofactors for the synthesis of neurotransmitters in the gut. Other nutrient deficiencies to look out for. Nutritional deficiencies can mean your brain doesn't have all the components it needs to function properly. Besides the neurotransmitters we talked about, here are some common nutritional deficiencies that can cause or worsen anxiety. Iron deficiency. Iron deficiency is the most common and widespread deficiency in the world. Globally, about 30% of people have iron deficiency. It is something to look out for once you are over 18, especially. Iron is an essential element in our bodies, as it helps preserve many essential functions, including general focus and energy, gastrointestinal processes, immune system, and body temperature regulation. It is particularly important in the management of anxiety. This is because iron is an essential mineral in the production of hemoglobin, a protein in red blood cells that carry oxygen from the lungs to all other body parts. Anxiety can occur when there is not enough oxygen available to body tissues. Additionally, a lack of iron strongly contributes to the balance between the excitatory and calming brain chemicals, glutamate and GABA, which help people with anxiety manage their stress. Good sources of iron include fortified cereals, beans, lentils, tofu, dried fruits, apricots, prunes, or raisins, prune juice, enriched breads, broccoli, and nuts. Fun fact: contrary to popular belief, spinach is actually not a great source of iron, as many of us have heard. The belief of spinach having a high iron content came around in 1870 with Dr. E. von Wolff and was not disproved until 1937, when it was discovered that the iron content was 1/10 the original claim. The mistake was due to a misplaced decimal point. Spinach is actually a better source of vitamin A than iron. Magnesium deficiency. Magnesium is a mineral that is naturally present in a wide array of food. It is available as a supplement and an ingredient in laxatives and antacids. This mineral plays an important role in helping more than 300 enzymes carry out various chemical reactions, such as building proteins and strengthening bones, regulating blood sugar, blood pressure, and muscle and nerve functions. It also acts as an electrical conductor that contracts muscles and makes the heart beat steadily. Magnesium is especially important for people with anxiety, as it helps with brain functions that reduce anxiety and stress. This deficiency is somewhat common, with one study suggesting that half of all Americans are magnesium deficient. There are many sources of magnesium in food, like almonds, peanuts, cashews, pumpkin seeds, peanut butter, beans, soybeans, soy milk, cooked spinach, Swiss chard, white potatoes with the skin, brown rice, oatmeal, salmon, beef, poultry, bananas, raisins, dark chocolate of at least 70%, milk, and yogurt. Omega-3 fatty acid deficiency. The three main omega-3 fatty acids are alpha-linolenic acid, ALA, eicosapentaenoic acid, EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, DHA. DHA is a primary structural component of the human brain, cerebral cortex, skin, and retina. Its deficiency is linked to several neurocognitive disorders and behaviors, including anxiety and depression, especially generalized anxiety disorder, which is the older sister to social anxiety disorder. Most primary sources of DHA are fish, including anchovies, salmon, herring, mackerel, tuna, trout, mussels, oysters, Atlantic cod, caviar, snow crab, tiger prawn, barramundi, clams, and halibut. You can also get it from grass-fed red meat and turkey. Eggs do contain small amounts of DHA. If you want a plant-based source of DHA, you can get it from spirulina, a blue-green algae, seaweed, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, strawberries, broccoli, edamame, kidney beans, pumpkin seeds, soybeans, avocado, coconut, as well as coconut oil, sunflower seeds, sunflower oil, and olive and olives. Vitamin B12 deficiency. Vitamin B12, also known as cobalamin, is a vitamin that is naturally present in some foods, added to others, and available as a dietary supplement and a prescription medication. It is required for the development and function of the nervous system, healthy red blood cell formation, and DNA synthesis. B12 deficiency can cause many psychiatric symptoms, including anxiety, panic, depression, and hallucinations. In fact, a vitamin B12 deficiency can directly cause someone to have a mood disorder. If you are trying to increase your vitamin B12 intake, then you should try eating some of the following food items: milk, fortified cereals, eggs, yogurt, salmon, tuna, clams, beef, liver, and kidneys. Eat sparingly, as organ meats are very high in cholesterol. Note: if you think you are suffering from a deficiency of any kind, Consult your doctor before taking a supplement. The importance of antioxidants for people with anxiety. According to researchers at the University of New York, anxiety is associated with a low antioxidant state in the body. Additionally, antioxidants elevate mood immediately and can provide long-standing health. Antioxidants are compounds in food that can prevent or delay cell damage caused by oxidation. People who suffer from anxiety or constant stress have increased oxidation in their bodies. Eating antioxidants reverses this process. Oxidation is a normal part of the body that can help fight pathogens, therefore reducing infections. Oxidative stress, or oxidative imbalance, happens when there is an imbalance between free radicals and antioxidants in the body. Oxidation is caused by many things in our environment, including stress and anxiety. Oxidative stress can have negative effects on the body, including anxiety. As you can see, if you have any type of anxiety, including social anxiety, antioxidants are an especially important component of your diet. If you think you are suffering from oxidative stress, a plant-based diet would be something to consider, as many studies have proven that a plant-based diet protects you against chronic oxidative stress-related diseases. Adding specific spices and herbs to your diet would also be a route to consider, as spices and herbs are some of the most antioxidant-rich ingredients, with the highest being clove, mint, cinnamon, oregano, thyme, and rosemary. Nuts and seeds are also a food group that is very antioxidant-rich, with walnuts having a particularly high level of antioxidants. Other nuts and seeds high in antioxidants are pecans, sunflower seeds, and chestnuts. Other foods high in antioxidants include dried apples, artichokes, blueberries, plums, apricots, kale, chili, prunes, strawberries, pomegranates, black olives, dates, mangoes, oranges, papaya, and broccoli. The danger of fad diets. We live in an age where endless, never-ending information is available to us. After all, we have cell phones near us almost all day, almost never away from our sides. And with these miniature computers glued to us comes the internet. Finding information has never been easier. The answer to our questions is just one Google search away. However, not all of the information available to us is based on fact. The internet gives so many people a place to have their voices heard, and a lot of the time, companies and their many advertisements make this possible. It's true that there are stupid people everywhere, and the internet is no exception. If you take a bunch of people who don't always know what they're talking about, and companies that will advertise anything to make a quick buck, you get a place rife with pseudoscience and magic cure-alls with no solid evidence to back up their claims. In this section, we will talk about the many fad diets that have shown up as a result of society's need for a quick fix to its problems. What is a fad diet? Fad diets are sold as the best and fastest way of solving various issues, usually weight gain, but also depression and anxiety. These trendy diets promise dramatic results in exchange for eliminating or increasing certain foods in your diet. These are the types of diets that you often see endorsed by celebrities. Some will talk about the amazing properties of certain foods like green tea, cabbage, or yogurt. Others will tell you to eliminate food, or often whole food groups, like bread, beef, or all grain products. Eliminating these foods can at least cause some mild inconvenience and deplete your body of essential nutrients that it needs to function properly. Some have you only eat during certain times of the day. Others may allow you to eat certain foods, but only when you eat them with other food. Some will have you split up your daily calorie intake into weird increments. All fad diets have one thing in common. They propose a temporary solution for something that might be a lifelong problem, such as a lifelong battle with managing social anxiety for many people. Now, not every diet is bad. Some diets are necessary for certain medical conditions or lifestyles. But what is healthy and necessary for one person isn't always healthy for another. So how do you know if a diet you are looking at is a fad diet? When looking at a potential diet or food regimen, it's important to look out for hyped-up claims that promise significant weight loss within a short amount of time. These diets are often touted by celebrities or TV personalities, which helps make them more believable to some people. Not only that, but they usually publish or post success stories, anecdotes masquerading as scientific data. The fad diets out there parade by in almost an endless stream, one decade to the next. Some take on new life. For example, The Atkins diet morphs into the keto diet. There have been diets based on your blood type, and diets dependent mostly on cabbage soup. Juice fasting has been a big trend, though it has lost a lot of its popularity because nutritionists found out that going on such a diet will lower your metabolism rate. However, fasting is still a popular diet trend, particularly intermittent fasting, wherein you can only eat during a certain window of time each day, and you will be fasting the rest of the day. The smaller the window when you can eat gets, the stricter the diet gets. Several problems arise when a person goes on such a diet. The most serious being that intermittent fasting is not sustainable as a lifestyle. Therefore, you may regain the weight as soon as you go off it, which can lead to cyclic dieting. The diet cycle is when you slip up and eat during the fasting part of the diet. Then you might feel guilty, and the guilt might trigger eating too much. You gain weight, and then you try the next fad diet. Your body has natural hunger cues, and the intermittent fasting diet will teach you to ignore them. Research has shown that when you restrict your food intake by fasting, your dopamine levels decrease, and by now you know what that means. The restrictiveness of the diet makes it dangerous because following it could lead to an eating disorder. People who practice extreme restriction of food intake were 18 times more likely to develop an eating disorder than those who did not. Be realistic. Your body is meant to move and rest. As we have learned, the amygdala is the part of the brain responsible for most of the uncomfortable symptoms we associate with social anxiety disorder. Prescription medications are often necessary to manage the fight or flight response, but exercise can also alleviate these unnerving feelings. In fact, it only takes about 20 minutes of exercising to experience these benefits. It's interesting to note that anti-anxiety meds often take longer than that to become effective. After a reasonable period of intense exercise, your muscles may feel less tense for an hour and a half or so, and your symptoms of anxiety may be reduced for 4 to 6 hours. What if you committed to exercising every day for 10 weeks? If you followed such a regimen, the benefits of exercise would not just last for a few hours. Instead, your overall general level of anxiety might fall, and you would be left feeling more comfortable in your own skin. However, a word of caution here. Exercise does not lower anxiety as much as pharmaceuticals. Neuroplasticity. The concept of neuroplasticity of the brain has become more widely known. Its hopeful message that people can change their brain makeup to improve their lives is now touted in popular culture, and articles about it appear all over the internet. Although scientists once thought that neuroplasticity of the brain only occurs during childhood, new ideas about it have emerged during the last few decades. Now experts recognize that adults' brains can change, though not as quickly or as easily as during childhood. Thus, adults can at times fix their brains to rid themselves of unwanted behavior triggered on an unconscious level. Regular exercise can improve how your brain operates by helping you develop better executive function. This group of skills is important in helping you set goals, plan, and in general, get stuff done. With a better executive function, people's working memory improves. They can think more flexibly and have better inhibitory control. As you might imagine, improving these skills might improve your anxiety. Exercise can stimulate cell growth in the brain, improving a person's cognitive function. However, research has shown that moderate exercise does not result in increases of neurotrophic factors. These are biomolecules supporting brain growth by supporting its neurons. The exercise must be rather taxing, and you must do it for at least 20 minutes, if not longer. Smolensky, Webb, and Hansen, who reported on this in 2013, cautioned that the experiments were short-term measurements of neurotrophic factors, and that the levels of these factors decreased to baseline at the conclusion of the exercise. They only theorized that a long-term commitment to exercise would result in long-lasting change. Chapter 5. Having self-confidence. Lack of self-confidence can cause many harmful repercussions in your life. It can make you engage in behaviors and use coping mechanisms that can leave you stuck in a cycle of self-loathing. What could be more injurious to self-confidence than being anxious all the time and constantly on the verge of a panic attack? A vicious cycle can begin. Anxiety can cause you to make impulsive choices that might destroy your inner peace. You feel that you have no say in the sort of life you are leading. My purpose in writing this book is to let you know that needn't be the case. You can regain self-confidence and have faith that you are making the right choices. I hope you will stay with me as I present some deceptively simple steps to reclaim your power and live a satisfying life. When you lose your sense of self-worth, you find that your fears are getting the better of you. You start to take everything too seriously and so personally that you are afraid to take any action at all. You feel you are losing your sense of control, and you find it difficult to handle any sort of criticism, no matter how well meant. As situations start snowballing, your fear of failure grows and grows. You feel as though you are living in a nightmare. You especially fear your bosses at work unless you have managed to become a boss yourself. Then you are careful to surround yourself with sycophants who do not dare to criticize you. You wanted to have it all. What happens if you fail? The thought that everyone will know you have failed is almost more than you can bear. Yes, you are afraid of discovery, and this includes self-discovery. You cannot afford to realize your own inadequacies, as your wavering self-esteem will take another blow. Sometimes this fear of failure turns people into workaholics. No one can accuse them of being lazy. Late at night, after everyone has gone home, they will still be at work, slaving away. Eventually, all your efforts at appearing to be successful wears you out. You have not taken the time to eat properly nor exercise. A feeling of fatigue overwhelms you. Or perhaps you have given your all to a relationship that lacks reciprocity. Despite all the evidence to the contrary, you are totally invested in making the relationship work. Only after your partner has done something totally unforgivable do you find the strength to end it and to go on from here. Somehow, you must find the courage within yourself to make a change. Somehow, you must find ways to alleviate the overwhelming anxiety that threatens to engulf you. It is hard to learn how to have confidence in yourself, but as I have said, there are steps you can take to lead a joyful, fulfilled life. 5 practices for developing confidence. When you have suffered excruciating blows to your self-confidence and find that you berate yourself mercilessly, have faith that you can overcome these lifetime habits. Here are some practices that may help. Consider what you have already accomplished in your life. Along the way, you have developed skills and enjoyed reaching goals. Celebrate what you have. When you look back on how much you have struggled, allow yourself to see how these experiences strengthened you. Realize that often you have demanded too much from yourself. You have been under a great deal of stress, which can harm your health. Practice mindfulness techniques, such as journaling and meditation, to alleviate the stress. Mindfulness practices may give you the self-knowledge you need to gain confidence in yourself. At some point, you may find within yourself the ability and willingness to help others. You, as a result, will become a happier person. Activities and actions to promote self-growth. Journaling. People often use the terms diary and journal interchangeably, but they differ in many respects. Some published books, such as The Diary of Anne Frank, might more accurately be called journals, which are more long-form and free-form than our diaries. Either way you put it, a diary or journal may be configured to any use you imagine. The purpose is to assist you in meeting your goals of higher self-esteem and a better life. It can live on your computer or the internet, or it can be what they call analog these days, a journal made up of actual pages bound in a hard or soft cover. An entire industry has built up around bullet journaling, where people buy blank books with a very light grid of lines on the pages and then fill them in daily. They can purchase colorful tape, washi tape, and stickers to mark pages or hide mistakes. Colored pens or pencils make each page stand out. When you think about it, a page in a book that charts your activities for each day, made as attractive as possible, may provide a big boost to self-esteem. You are saying to yourself, I am worth it, worth every moment of my time designing and executing the pages of my journal that describe my day, worth every expense and effort I made to make this journal beautiful. Companies publish pre-printed journals to meet the many needs buyers might have. Some help you identify your goals, whereas others encourage you in your creative efforts. Some are so detailed, they only can cover half the year, or less. Others are undated and can be filled out whenever the journaler desires. Of course, anyone who has a computer can use it for journaling, as long as they also have a word processing program. Coaches and other helpful people want to present clients with journal pages to help them meet specific goals, but have had a problem because these formats have to be printed out. Then they form a messy stack of paper rather than a neat bound journal. However, computer experts have come up with special programs wherein pages for journaling have been formatted and they can be written right in the program. A program called Notion, which is free, has a variety of templates that can form the basis for a journal or diary. Some of the templates come with the program, but others are available for free or can be purchased. A journaling template that comes with the program has the following format: daily pages, date, happenings, grateful for, intentions. Of course, you can write as much as you wish in each section. Other formats offer checklists, so you can check off the squares for each daily, weekly, monthly, or even yearly goal you accomplish. When to journal. Some people swear by a morning practice of journaling, sometimes called the morning pages, a term made popular by self-help author Julia Cameron. Cameron is fairly strict in how you approach this daily duty. You might be able to grab a cup of coffee, especially if you prepared the coffee maker the night before, but aside from that, the idea is to go directly from your sleeping state to writing in your journal. The science behind this practice is becoming clearer as researchers analyze that weird period between sleeping and waking, the state of hypnagogia. Scientists are taking note of what strange things people are thinking before falling asleep by asking them questions just as they are about to drop off in the sleep lab. But the same phenomenon occurs as people come awake. This is a time when we are closest to our unconscious selves and when our brains are most open to suggestions directed at our unconscious minds. Cameron has written many books on the topic, including The Artist's Way. As its title suggests, she directs her attention mainly towards problems creatives encounter, but the morning pages technique can benefit anyone who wants to know themselves a little better. Cameron has never wavered in her insistence that these pages be written in longhand and fill 3 pages of notebook-sized paper. When asked why they must be handwritten, she explains in a later book, "The computer is fast, too fast for our purposes. Writing by computer gets you speed, but not depth. Writing by computer is like driving a car at 85 miles per hour. Everything is a blur. Oh my God, was that my exit? Writing by hand is like going 35 miles per hour. Oh, look, here comes my exit. And look, it has a Sunoco station and a convenience store." Longhand pages give us detail and the truth of how we feel emotionally. Accuracy is what we are after, not velocity. Longhand pages tell us precisely how we feel. Since the point of all this journaling is to make peace with ourselves and overcome our persistent anxiety, her position has merit. However, there are many great ideas about the best time for journaling out there, and their proponents can point to many reasons why their ideas will work as well. One suggestion is to dip into your journal at various times throughout the day. The journal acts as a kind of thermometer, revealing how you are feeling at that moment. If you discover you are most anxious at one particular time of day, that may provide important insights into the reasons behind this troubling emotion. Also, if possible, you might plan to practice other calming or physical exercises at that particular time to tamp down the anxiety. Another theory for when to journal is at night, just prior to bedtime. You might write about what made you grateful throughout the day. This may induce a good mood before sleep, and you may sleep better. Or you could examine what was good about the day. What bothered you? Is there anything you would like to change if you could give the day a do-over? You could also write about what you would like to accomplish tomorrow. Writing the answers to these questions might hint at what you must change to live a more productive life. Meditation. To be in a state of meditation means letting go of your mind and its thoughts. You can let them exist in the background in a never-ending stream while you experience the mystery of what it means to be human. In fact, in their guided meditations, meditation teachers ask you to view your thoughts as fallen leaves in a stream, going this way and that, always away from you, making room for more thoughts you can envision in the same way. When meditating, do not expect your mind to become perfectly empty and still. Being in that state of mind goes against human nature. Instead, you may hope through your meditation practice eventually to achieve a steadiness of mind, no matter what is going on in your life. This does not mean that you are never nervous, never anxious, never afraid, or never sad. It means that underneath the above-ground chatter, you can achieve a oneness with creation that will never steer you wrong. In other words, you have reached a state of profound spiritual awareness, which after all has always been the goal of meditation. If you decide to meditate daily, do not commit to only one way to proceed, because eventually, even if it left you excited and hopeful, it will become boring if repeated repeatedly. Instead, you should have a variety of techniques up your sleeve to turn to so that your practice does not become stale. Your goal is to turn your meditation practice into an ongoing journey of deepening awakeness and curiosity. Reiki. Reiki is a Japanese healing modality that has spread in its popularity with practitioners now all over the world. It has its modern origins in the early 20th century, but its founders claimed its roots stretch far back in the past, to meditation practices from ancient India. To accomplish their hands-on healing, practitioners must have a solid meditation practice. This applies to anyone who wants to use this healing on themselves. However, they must take a series of courses to practice on others. The healer's goal is to heal as Jesus Christ and the ancient Indian gurus did, by simply applying their hands to the body and let ki, or divine energy, flow through them to the affected person. Some interesting research has been conducted on how Reiki can help with both physical and psychological symptoms. The Center for Reiki Research, in conjunction with Harvard University, measured how a single Reiki session would affect a person's physical and psychological health. Around 100 certified Reiki practitioners, along with their clients, participated. A typical lesson lasts about an hour, while the client lies fully clothed on a massage table and the practitioner lays their hands on the affected part of the body or allows them to hover over the body. There are prescribed hand positions that reflect various schools of Reiki teaching. After the session, the clients then answered a questionnaire asking them about improvements in their psychological and physical well-being. The psychological problem that Reiki most helped, according to the study, was anxiety. The only symptom that Reiki helped more than anxiety was tiredness. This may be why, in 800 hospitals across the world, Reiki practitioners help the staff in various capacities. The most frequent need for the practice is with the hospital's cancer patients, whom Reiki helps both with their pain and their anxiety. A crucial meditation to practice prior to beginning any Reiki practice is called the Gasso meditation. In Japanese, this means two hands coming together. A meditator sits or stands with their palms together, fingers pointed upward, a traditional pose for prayer. They must let their thoughts flow by, not ignoring them, not trying to push them aside, but not being caught up in them either. Reiki has several symbols that an initiate must learn to draw, and to meditate this way, they need to imagine drawing the proper symbol on their palms. They become alert to sensations in their body and realize that heat is emanating from between their palms. That is how they become conscious of the ki, or universal energy, which they can use to heal themselves or others. Part of the meditation involves directing the ki in how it flows through the body. Reiki masters teach that practitioners must meditate daily. Yoga. Like Reiki, yoga as practiced in the West has its roots in the soil of India, in Sanatana Dharma, the eternal religion, or Hinduism, as people call it today. Yoga comes in a great many types and forms. All yoga focuses on asana, pose, pranayama, breath, and meditation, but the percent of time each practice spends on these essential facets varies widely. Hatha yoga is mainly concerned with the physical poses, but in the end, its goal is to unite the body, mind, and spirit. Nevertheless, many Western practitioners often focus only on how Hatha yoga may contribute to their overall physical fitness. Within the yoga tradition, Hatha yoga becomes a pathway to expressing greater devotion in the form of bhakti yoga. When the prana, or the breath, can circulate fluidly throughout the body through physical poses, a person experiences a sense of freedom. They are ready to engage in devotional practices, which begin with the traditional yoga pose. Sit on a cushion, legs crossed in front of you, or chair, feet flat on the floor, and keep your back straight. Lay your hands on your thighs, palms up, close your eyes, and focus your mind on God. People often focus on their breath to bypass an unquiet mind. If you find you need help with this, you can find it online or in devotional yoga classes. A great many guided meditations are online and cost nothing. Sites like calm.com have both free and more extensive paid versions. Prayer. Prayers you recite while at a religious service or practicing your religion by yourself or within the confines of your family will often leave you feeling at peace. Even if you are alone, knowing that these prayers have great meaning to others who share your faith can provide comfort. You are reaching toward the divine, and your faith that the ineffable is listening to you, loves you, and wants to help you can give you peace in good times and bad. Mid-20th century, the founders of the Alcoholics Anonymous recognized that spirituality is often the only cure for human ills, specifically alcoholism, although these days, anonymous groups of every stripe practice their ideas. The AA founders, alcoholics themselves, picked a prayer by St. Francis of Assisi to close their meetings. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Search among the writings specific to your faith and pick prayers that resonate with you. At times, having an altar in your home where you can light a candle or burn incense will provide a peaceful haven for reciting your prayers. Discipline for the mind. Stoicism is an ancient philosophy whose founder, Zeno of Citium, first taught from his home in Athens, usually from the porch of his home, in 300 BC. Its name is derived from stoa, the Greek word for porch. It spread throughout ancient Greece and then to the Romans, of whom the most famous practitioner and writer about Stoicism was the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. However, it did not influence only the rich and powerful. Everyday people could become Stoics as well. The internet has allowed this philosophy to spread throughout our modern world. It is popular among younger generations because they feel they need to discipline their minds against chaotic thinking and its sometimes violent outcomes. Stoic philosophy encourages its followers to lead virtuous lives of service to their families and to the community. Zeno's time bears similarities to our own. The Greek world of that era saw enormous changes in the culture. Many of the city-states disappeared because of internecine fighting, and the Greek people feared invasions from the east. This type of change caused a sense of helplessness. Their world was in chaos, and they could do nothing about it. This is where Stoicism came in, to help them fortify themselves against the constant atmosphere of fear. Stoicism teaches, as did St. Francis in his prayer, that some things may be under our control, but others are not. They believe we should stop obsessing about whatever it is we cannot control, so we can focus on the things we can. What about emotions such as fear? Stoicism teaches that emotions are out of our control. However, the philosophy also teaches that there are right and wrong ways to react to emotions. Its adherents believe that a person can react appropriately to their emotions if they examine them and then act according to the Stoic virtues: wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. With regard to something a person feels passionate about, Stoics teach that any emotion should not get in the way of thinking. Here is one Stoic's answer to how to handle common situations using the Stoic virtues. For example, not shouting at your friends just because you're in a bad mood is an act of prudence or wisdom. Telling the truth regardless of the consequences is fortitude or courage. Treating people equally regardless of who they are is morality or justice. Not playing all night to break your sleep schedule is temperance or moderation. Most self-help therapies rely on some aspect of Stoicism, even if it isn't called that. For example, a popular therapeutic intervention used worldwide is CBT, or cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT therapists encourage their clients to view the world and their problems through a realistic lens, as do Stoics. A meta-analysis of CBT data showed that the modality is effective in almost 80% of panic disorders. It is effective in 75% of social anxiety disorders as well. Self-confidence and our relationships. Assuming that everyone else is judging you is assuming that everyone else is judgmental and mean, and it's not fair to them to think this way. When you assume the best, you strengthen your relationships. For people with social anxiety, assuming the best about others may be more difficult than it is for people without social anxiety. This may be because the biases we are born with and come with the territory of being human exert more power over an anxious person's mind than in a person without anxiety. An anxious person needs to train themselves to view the world more rationally. It may help to recognize these biases for what they are, means of survival in a dangerous world. During the time our ancestors lived in the forest, they developed coping defenses to avoid becoming isolated. This is because for small, primitive groups of people, becoming isolated from the group meant almost certain death. Therefore, the opinions of others became matters of life or death. The spotlight effect bias developed during that ancient time due to constantly worrying about what others thought. Today, it takes hold of you when you imagine that your every imperfection looms large on others' minds. You think a tiny stain on your clothing or a mistake like mispronouncing a word is a reason for others to make negative judgments about you, and that causes you to panic. A person with social anxiety may know these feelings are irrational, but they cannot help themselves. Although some mistakes may cause others to judge you, as a rational person, you realize that not everyone is judging you. Also, if they do judge you, their opinions do not have to affect your feelings about yourself. You can hold on to self-esteem no matter what others think. Another bias that comes into play is the egocentric bias. This is when you assume everyone thinks as you do. So if you judge yourself harshly, you assume that others are doing the same. Today, as in ancient times, the egocentric bias is meant to help us survive as individuals within the group. The best way to counter the negative effects of this bias is to have a kinder attitude toward oneself and others. I hope that some of the practices and information in this book may help you do just that. Chapter 6. Stop criticizing yourself. Learning to love yourself is hard. If it were easy, there would not be as many self-help books like this one on the market. Negative self-talk. One of the chief barriers to loving yourself is negative self-talk. Negative self-talk is highly related to perfectionism, and the beliefs we hold about ourselves can trigger both. Anyone in the workplace knows that perfect performance while completing a task is not only an ideal, it is often a necessity. A mason constructing a crooked wall risks building a structure that cannot stand. A surgeon who fails to meet the stringent requirements of their profession risks the life of their patient. A person at the controls of an aircraft without the proper flight training risks crashing the plane and losing their life, and the lives of all aboard. Anyone satisfied with their own slipshod performance risks losing their job, and if not their job, at the least, the respect of their coworkers. It is when perfectionism slips out of the arena of performance and into our minds, urging us to judge ourselves by impossibly high standards, that it can become destructive rather than protective. And thus begins the cycle of messages we lambast ourselves with. The "I'm not good enoughs," and the "I will never get this right," or "I will never reach that sales goal." Everyone now and again will experience failure of some sort or other. Those who have a strong sense of themselves and their own self-worth will regard failure as a learning opportunity, whereas people with a low sense of self-worth may use the failure as a reason to berate themselves at every turn. Habitual negative self-talk usually takes hold at a young age, before a person's brain is fully formed, and while the person is extremely vulnerable to outside influences. This can happen in the home, when parental authority takes a destructive turn, with a parent constantly criticizing a child and expressing regret that their child does not come close to the ideal child they had hoped for. Bullying at school and beyond can also scar the psyche. When a person who has been bullied falls into the habit of negative self-talk, it is like they are now bullying themselves. Sadly, a downward spiral of negative self-talk can lead to hopelessness, depression, and even thoughts of suicide. Constructive self-criticism. Our brains just want to keep us alive. That's why we have that pesky fear response that causes us so much anxiety. Self-criticism in our brain is similar to our fear response in that it's there to ensure our survival, but can easily get out of control and cause all sorts of problems. It is important for our brain to recognize when we are acting in a way that doesn't promote our survival, so we can choose a healthier alternative. For example, our brain telling us, "It's okay if you want another hour of sleep, work can wait," isn't conducive to our survival. It's more beneficial for your brain to say, "Hey, I know you're really tired and you want to stay in bed all day, but you have a really important meeting at work today and you can't be late." By sending you this message, your brain is helping you make better choices, while also discouraging you from making mistakes that could harm you. It's never fun to be on the receiving end of such a message, but that mental message is important to keep yourself in check and make healthy decisions. Here are 3 ways to turn toxic self-criticism into constructive self-criticism as listed by Tony TCTN in a 2019 Medium article. Stop being oblivious to the messages you send yourself. Don't let overly critical thoughts drag you down. When you have a negative thought, try to replace it with a more realistic statement. When you find yourself thinking, "I'm not good enough," look around you. You were sitting there, listening to this book. Is that not proof enough that you were trying to become the best possible version of yourself you can be? Don't your efforts at self-improvement deserve a little praise? Your brain is trainable. You can change. As we have explored in our discussion of neuroplasticity in an earlier chapter, you are capable of change at any age. When you listen to your thoughts and channel them into constructive statements, you are doing that training right now. Constructive self-criticism must be applied judiciously for it to work. Realize that you can only change behavior and situations that are specific and actually changeable. To get into a funk over something you cannot control is totally counterproductive. This type of thinking is what leads to depression and its sister, anxiety. Realize the pointlessness of punishing yourself for something that is out of your control. Constructive self-criticism should always be compassionate. You can say to yourself, "Yes, I made a mistake, but one mistake does not define me." You realize that you are an individual with both strengths and weaknesses, and that you need to be kind to yourself. Parents, teachers, and social media. Negative self-talk usually starts at a young age. It might become a habit because the child has internalized criticism from parents or parental figures, or taunts from bullies at home or school. Another potential source of negativity that you turn on yourself are teachers, whether from elementary school, high school, or college. Many people can recall how they were discouraged from engaging in certain activities or following a particular career path because a teacher made fun of or trivialized their efforts. Other sources of odious comparisons are social media sites. These are particularly detrimental to the mental health of young girls who may compare themselves unfavorably to the attractive tweens and teens they see on Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. Social media users may not take into account that they are viewing carefully curated displays designed to make the best possible impression. Of course, you could argue that this has always been the case. People in earlier decades compared themselves to the models pictured in magazines or characters in books. The difference is that people understand the models are not typical of your average human and that the characters in books are fictional. The people whose pictures they view on social media may instead be their friends or fellow students. Even if they are strangers, they are still real people who may be a person's peers. Dr. Susan Bialy-Haas, a former dancer who fought against depression by researching ways she could create for herself a more fulfilling, healthier life, wrote in 2018 about several ways people could stop comparing themselves to others. Haas recommends cutting way back on social media. People who are ill or too poor to take a vacation often become depressed by others' colorful vacation posts. Maybe they have never visited the tropics and know they never will. Will seeing a photo of you on the beach sipping your margarita make them feel better? Likely not. Haas herself stopped posting pictures of her vacations years ago. She advises readers to stop and think prior to posting pictures that might make others feel bad because they cannot enjoy such a luxury. And then readers should do the same for themselves. Take a vacation from online social media, or a prolonged leave of absence, or limit your exposure to the point where nothing on a site is affecting you negatively. Other tips Haas has up her sleeve. Triggers. Become aware of people or situations that increase the chance you will participate in the comparison game. Perhaps list them so you can better avoid them. Outside versus inside. Haas stresses the importance of keeping in mind that the persona people use to face the world may not match what is going on in their minds. It is impossible to know what people are thinking and what problems they are facing if they do not share. All might not be as brilliant as they would have you believe. Have a few good mantras kicking around in your brain, such as, "Money doesn't buy happiness and never will." As a flamenco dancer, Haas used to perform at the most exclusive clubs. Some wealthy, chic, famous members turned out to be the unhappiest people around. Aside from buying the basics, money does not guarantee happiness in any flavor. Comparison as motivation. Look around and find wonderful traits in others that would be worthwhile to emulate. Kindness, fortitude, courage. The list can go on and on. Attitude of gratitude. People who count their blessings seldom are so needy that they become jealous or envious of others. Unrealistic goals versus smart goals. When you subject yourself to a constant barrage of self-criticism, you feel anxious. You are desperate to improve your situation. You may find yourself setting goals for yourself that are lofty and extremely hard to reach. You tell yourself that if you reach that hard-to-accomplish goal, your self-criticism will carry no weight. You will be free of it because now you will finally be able to love and respect yourself. But the goal always seems forever out of reach, and so you keep on berating yourself. You are caught in a continual cycle of failure, followed by self-criticism, and then another failure and renewed self-criticism. The lofty goal becomes another reason not to change, to stay in the same rut. Among the many biases that often distort rationality is a bias that can encourage people to embark upon an unrealistic and risky career path or make a risky business decision. It is called the survivorship bias, and it developed as a heuristic to turn to when dangerous conditions force an immediate decision. A heuristic is a shortcut to making a decision when a person does not have all the facts to hand to make a better choice. Survivorship bias means that when you decide on a certain course of action, you are only taking into account the successful completion of this action and not considering the failures, which may be many. It is dangerous because it occurs on an unconscious level, and so it may not be taken for what it is, a bias. For example, a college student might decide to drop out of college because Steve Jobs did it and he was successful. They don't know about and don't take into account the thousands of solo entrepreneurs who failed. Furthermore, they may not know that the vast majority of successful business people in this country graduated from college. Another example to consider from academia are the tenured professors who run the place. These professors are the survivors, and they may have been able to devote the time needed for success in their fields because of a privileged background. When students decide they want to attain status in the ivory tower, they may not be taking into account all those who tried and failed to attain this kind of position. The business world acknowledges, but only in passing, that 95% of startups fail. The successful entrepreneurs, the Bill Gates and the Zuckerbergs of this world, are lionized, but those who tried and didn't succeed are forgotten. The same goes for movie or TV stars, singers and dancers, or TV chefs for that matter. What business or entertainment writers often do not acknowledge is that these people's success stories may be due as much to luck as anything else. So how do you change from clinging to unrealistic goals to implementing a plan that may help you achieve the success you long for? SMART goals. SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound. It is a way to focus on the type of goal that would work for the average business. In other words, no pie in the sky. We have to ask, what about those unrealistic goals? What about those dreams? Should you simply give them up and focus instead on quotidian possibilities? SMART goals have drawbacks, especially if they are the only method used to measure success or failure. They can cause people or businesses to focus only on short-term success. For example, businesses that only focus on the price of their shares in the stock market may lose sight of other important goals. If they only want to please their shareholders, they may push more ambitious aspirations to the background. Also, the terms realistic and achievable can be ambiguous. You may see a goal as realistic viewed on its own, but what if it is one of many goals? A person who is ambitious may have too many goals, and fitting them in order of their priority can be daunting. As famed mountain climber and adventurer Lei Wang has observed, pursuing a lofty dream and fulfilling your greater purpose requires a broad vision, one that goes way beyond the immediacy of the next SMART goal. SMART goals can serve as checkpoints in your long journey to keep you on the path toward success. It is important to measure progress by growth and effort as well, because it is the growth and learning along the way that are of the most value. Positive thinking and the law of attraction. In 2007, people gathered in front of their TVs to watch the documentary The Secret, produced in Australia by Rhonda Byrne, who claimed she completed her research for the film, essentially dozens of books on the topic from the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, in 2.5 weeks. Later, she wrote the accompanying book, also entitled The Secret. Both the movie, marketed as a DVD, and the book became bestsellers. Later, Byrne penned 5 more books in the series. Although William Walker Atkinson first referred to the basic idea behind The Secret as the law of attraction in 1901, Byrne claims it is part of every religion on earth. Disciples who wrote down the sayings of Jesus Christ and Buddha presented this idea to the world, but few understand it. How can we believe that each person is responsible for their own reality, despite Descartes declaring, "I think, therefore I am"? Byrne takes an incomprehensible saying in the book of Matthew and tweaks it to illustrate her point. Whoever has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. On its face, this teaching appears to contradict every idea of Christian charity. However, when Byrne inserts into the saying the word gratitude, which she calls a hidden word, it makes perfect sense in light of the law of attraction. Whoever has gratitude will be given more, and he or she will have an abundance. Whoever does not have gratitude, even what he or she has will be taken from him or her. It makes sense because Byrne asserts and provides examples that every religion not only promotes the idea of gratitude, but makes gratitude the linchpin for all other virtues. She asserts that if you are not grateful for what you have now, it will make it impossible for you to visualize a future that you long to achieve. Another one of Byrne's books, The Magic, has no subtitle, but its first words of text are, "One word changes everything." She finds examples not only in established world religions, but also religions that have been regarded as primitive, such as this saying from a renowned Shawnee chief: "When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the morning light, for your life and strength. Give thanks for your food and the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies with yourself." Byrne's example from the Quran sounds quite similar to the Matthew passage, as she amended it, "And remember when God proclaimed, 'If you are grateful, I will give you more. But if you are ungrateful, verily my punishment is indeed severe.'" The thousands or perhaps tens of thousands or millions of New Agers who believe in the law of attraction believe it applies universally, from the smallest particles within an atom to the trillions of stars in the sky, and of course to human beings and our affairs, both big and small. The law of attraction is, like attracts like. Adherents realize thoughts have their own energy, just like physical bodies. Therefore, negative thoughts will attract negative occurrences into your life, whereas positive thoughts will attract positive happenings. Likewise, Newton's law of motion in the universe, that every action has an opposite and equal reaction, also applies. Someone who is grateful is also someone who is receiving more bounty from the world. Evelyn Hicks and Abraham. Displaying more gratitude and bringing more prosperity and beauty into this world are indeed desirable. But what about the law of attraction when it is taken too far? Enter Evelyn Hicks, who authored several books about the law of attraction with her husband, Jerry Hicks. Evelyn claims to be able to channel several spiritual beings through an entity she calls Abraham. Like Byrne, Evelyn hopes that her ideas expressed through Abraham will bring hope and joy into the world. She and her husband had been among the self-help experts Byrne interviewed in the film, and whose ideas she planned to compile in the book, The Secret. However, although she and her husband initially appeared in the film, they were edited out before it was released, and no words of wisdom from Abraham appear in the book. Evelyn has been a popular speaker in front of interested groups throughout the United States and abroad. However, in one talk, she claimed that Jews brought the Holocaust upon themselves. This statement caused headlines, but she refused to retract it. If you take the idea of like attracts like to its logical end, this ignorant and hateful idea might be a result. So what arguments exist against the law of attraction? Would it work in every case? Would it work at all? The confirmation bias. Controversial internet entrepreneur and writer Mark Manson, the author of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, has a bone to pick with The Secret, and in fact with the entire self-help industry. Manson acknowledges that many people have reported initial success with The Secret, but he explains that this is due to a bias called the confirmation bias. This is a bias most people have that causes them to be less open to other people's cultures and beliefs unless they conform to one's own beliefs. In the case of the law of attraction, if a person acknowledges only positive thoughts about themselves and discounts anything negative, their confirmation bias clicks in to reinforce those beliefs. Now they can never imagine they might do something that goes against this vision of themselves. Manson admits that for some people, this mindset could afford them a huge leap in self-esteem. However, he sees a problem when that person tries to put their newfound positive beliefs about themselves into practice. Since they can never admit a negative hint about themselves or their motives to leak into their minds, they can be led astray by megalomaniac ideas. They could be doing all sorts of destructive things and never admit it, never even see it. If they tell lies, they can convince themselves that their lies are actually true. Unquestioning adherence to the law of attraction principles may damage relationships and wreak havoc on projects, but it can also damage the individual possessing these beliefs. This is because a great deal of psychological research exists that directly refutes claims brought by Byrne and other authors. This research suggests that continual repression of thoughts can only cause these thoughts to loom larger in your mind. The battle to repress them becomes more and more difficult. As time goes on, the thoughts are more and more likely to recur, causing a person to ruminate about them, and perhaps become obsessive-compulsive, depressed, anxious, or all three. Research also suggests that positive thinking about, say, a job interview can worsen a person's chances of getting the job. This is because they now believe that the universe is handling everything for them, and that they need do nothing except direct their desires into the infinite. Thus they become lazy and do not practice the due diligence needed to impress the interviewer and actually get the job. Another negative outcome of self-confidence brought about by constantly repeating self-affirmations also is possible. Scientists subjected groups of self-affirming people and those who did not practice these affirmations to various tests. What they found is that the self-affirming people tended to be more close-minded than the other group and rejected any solutions to problems if the solutions did not fit in with their idealized self-concept. They also became angry if their delusional sense of self was criticized, even if the criticism was constructive. A dangerous outcome to this type of thinking could be a doctor presenting a person with test results that do not fit in with their vision of themselves. The person becomes angry and ignores the doctor's advice, and as a result becomes more ill. Often, we don't know what kind of imaginary future would actually make us happy if what we envision becomes true. For example, we might imagine a life of wealth and privilege, but if we attain that lifestyle, we may find it does not make us happy. Or we might envision nights of endless partying, only to realize that this endless round of self-indulgence leaves us bored and apathetic. Just wishing will not make it so. The road to self-improvement has always been a narrow path. To improve the mind can mean letting go of cherished beliefs. Contrary to what one would assume, confirmation bias is common among scientists. It is only the rigor of the scientific method that allows for more discoveries. A person taught the scientific method learns to ignore their personal biases and rest their confidence on proven outcomes. Still, some very famous people have failed to do so when it came to believing their rivals' work or holding on to cherished beliefs they were taught in childhood. Isaac Newton, for example, continued to believe that the world was only 6,000 years old. Galileo did not credit the work of Kepler, who hypothesized that the moon's gravity causes tides. Putting aside the beliefs that form your worldview is painful and sometimes impossible. Western medicine continued to tout medieval cures long after the scientific method and its results generally became accepted by most educated people. The religious aversion to, and the fact that societies actually made it a crime to dissect a human corpse, prevented any advances. These beliefs persisted throughout the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, up through the 18th century. Galen, the ancient Roman physician, known along with Hippocrates as the father of medicine, did dissect corpses. But this practice could not continue under the aegis of the Christian Church. So for over 1,000 years after Galen, doctors actually had no idea about how the body worked or what it looked like on the inside. Called the father of modern science by Albert Einstein, Galileo Galilei proved the Copernican theory that the Earth revolves around the sun. In 1633, inquisitors appointed by Pope Urban VIII sentenced Galileo, then elderly, to prison, and under threat of torture, forced him to recant his claim. Eventually, the Pope relented and reduced the physicist's sentence to house arrest. The church leaders found it much more comfortable to consider our Earth as the center of the universe. What I hope you have learned from this chapter is that moderation is the key. Yes, try to substitute those negative beliefs about yourself with positive beliefs, but do not become so delusional that you refuse to accept reality. Chapter 7. Let go of the past. The advice, let go of the past, is a common theme. If you seek counseling, that is often the first thing a counselor will tell you, but you find it difficult. You know reliving dreadful scenes from the past only adds to your social anxiety, but you cannot seem to help yourself. Why is this so? Perhaps you have a rather distorted view of your past because of your anxiety disorder. Times when you made an embarrassing faux pas looming large in your mind. For example, you avoid speaking in public because of that time in grade school when you had a part in the student play and forgot all your lines. Plus, you will never try out for another play because I can't act is imprinted in your brain. Different reasons why people tend to hold on to the past may be keeping you back. One may be the fear of the unknown. As we have mentioned, you have an inner critic. The inner critic developed during a time when you felt powerless and alone. Its purpose was to protect you, but when it outlived that purpose, you found it hard not to listen anyway. The critic is telling you it's a difficult world out there, and it is better not to take any undue chances. You can approach this critic with a logical perspective. The critic is not you. You are not your past. You also may have the mistaken belief that somehow your pain is protecting you. You think if you keep the bad experience uppermost in your mind, you can prevent it from happening again. You feel you must be extra vigilant. Hypervigilant is a term often used here. And this vigilance gives you a false sense of being in control. This belief may be reinforced by your inner critic that insists you must, at all costs, avoid a situation where this might happen. This often means cutting yourself off from possible relationships, especially with the opposite sex. You may be using your past to get special treatment from others. Forgive yourself for doing that and move on. You want to be loved and cared for, but find it is easier to blame others than to accept the responsibility for your own happiness. The answer to all these barriers to living in the present begins with self-care, as discussed earlier in the book. Also, a sense of gratitude is important. You can learn from your experiences without reliving them. Use various methods to observe the pain without being in the pain. As previously mentioned, see that it is not a part of you, but separate from you. One way to do this is to set time aside just for remembering, not the negative memories, but the positive ones. Write them in your journal. If a negative memory surfaces, do not dwell on it. You can break a negative cycle by practicing mindfulness strategies, such as attending to your breath or focusing on what you currently smell or hear. Focusing on senses other than sight can lead to more peaceful memories if what you suffer from is a recurring vision in your mind of a past traumatic event. If you find the negative memories crop up anyway, try being proactive about them instead of passively letting them flow over you. Think of other ways to live in the present moment, going for a walk, watching for wildlife, such as birding, or focusing on artistic endeavors that bring you pleasure. Forgiveness. The perpetrator who caused you pain looms in your memory, and you cannot bring yourself to forgive them. Punishing the perpetrator might feel good in the moment, but reinforces your pain in the long run. An eye for an eye makes the world go blind. You end up giving your power away and keeping yourself chained. However, some hurts really are unforgivable. These include physical and emotional abuse, having a close relationship with someone who cheats but shows no remorse, constantly lies, takes no responsibility, or has controlling tendencies. Also, people may find being the object of extreme jealousy unforgivable. This list, of course, does not take into account people who have been victims of crimes. Murder is never forgivable, unless the victim chooses to forgive. Another crime that verges on unforgivable is the plunder of a person's life savings by some grifter. Victims of terrible events like the Holocaust can never forgive their perpetrators because they can never speak for all the other victims. If a therapist tells you you must forgive a person who has harmed you in some way, you can take their advice or leave it. Keep in mind they may have a deep religious belief that they hope you will share, but you do not have to share it. Their belief appears to require forgiveness in all situations, but this may not be possible for you. You can thank them for their insight, but only say you will think about it. Do not torture yourself if you cannot forgive someone. Trust there will be a future where it will not matter whether you forgive them or not. People who ruminate about past hurts remain victims as long as the perpetrator has power over their lives, and the perpetrator retains power as long as their victim continues to suffer. So if you cannot forgive the perpetrator and let go of your pain that way, what else can you do? Forgive yourself. Often, people with social anxiety blame themselves harshly for any disruptions or embarrassment they may have caused other people. The intense shame they feel about their behavior may make them want to hide away so such an incident will not happen again. As I mentioned when discussing the spotlight effect, it is possible that they only think people remember their behavior and hold it against them. Or they simply may feel embarrassed because of what they felt inside, not because of anything they actually did. Suppose you attend a religion class after elementary school, and after that class, while you are walking home along the highway, a boy from the class catches up with you and wants to talk about God. You do not know how to talk about your feelings or about anything important or serious, really. You feel so inadequate that you begin running, and you run all the way home. Years later, you are still ashamed. No one in your family ever opened up to you, or you to them, and you could not open up to anyone else. But you blame yourself, and you hang on to that blame for years and years. You always wonder what that boy thought of you, but you never saw him again. Only when you fully forgive yourself can you be at peace. To anyone else, the incident may seem minor, a silly embarrassment easily forgotten. There could be lots of reasons behind your behavior besides social anxiety. Maybe you did not like the boy, or maybe you were afraid of him, but you never cut yourself any slack. So how do you forgive yourself? Here are a few suggestions. Have a conversation with yourself and pretend it is with a really good friend. A good friend wouldn't let you beat yourself up like that. They would say something like, "None of us are perfect. Stop expecting too much of yourself. Time to let it go." When you write it down, your problem becomes less amorphous, less overarching, and less intrusive. It begins to feel like something you can accept about yourself. You are not making excuses for yourself or blaming other people. You simply acknowledge that your social awkwardness didn't arise out of the blue. It had its causes. Yes, your behavior wasn't ideal, in your eyes at least, but you also know that sometime in the past the behavior helped you, or you wouldn't have acted that way. Acknowledge its helpfulness and then move on. There is no way now you can make amends for something that far back in the past. However, you realize you are able to treat people in a compassionate and thoughtful way, and you accept that is amends enough. Realize that forgiveness isn't a one-time event. Rather, it is a process you engage in over time. It's possible you must converse with yourself and write about the event several times in order to be at peace with yourself. Acceptance. Another way of moving on with your life is through acceptance. Being able to accept life as it is and people as they are can be just about as difficult as being able to forgive the perpetrators. You need to stop only seeing the clouds and never the sunshine, or if you are overcompensating, viewing the world through rose-colored glasses, as they say. Acceptance means having the ability to live in the now. It means acceptance of yourself with all your flaws, but also your virtues. Many people with social anxiety attempt to hide their virtues, both from themselves and from others, because they have a huge fear of standing out. It may be that someone picked on them in the past, and now all they want to do is hide. Acceptance may mean going with the flow because you realize the world is a changeable place, but it does not affect your ability to see the wrongs of this world and want to fix them. Because people with social anxiety often are highly sensitive, they may be more aware of the world's injustices than others. Because you now approach life with acceptance, you also accept that an injustice was done to you. You do not try to deny it or make excuses for the perpetrators. On the other hand, unless an actual crime was committed, you are not out for revenge. You elect to move on with your life in the best way that you can. You know that your success, in spite of it all, is your best possible revenge. Acceptance is a preeminent virtue that can lead to other virtues. A virtue is not some Victorian relic, but an invisible power that can protect us against life's vicissitudes. In fact, the word virtue comes from the Latin word virtus, which means force, worth, or power. Acceptance is protection against stress, the precursor to social anxiety. If you can practice acceptance with people, you will help the other person feel acknowledged and adequate. Practicing acceptance in this way is akin to love. If you can practice acceptance of circumstances, it means you can view life from many different perspectives. When a person has attained the virtue of acceptance, they exercise other virtues too, like awareness, generosity, consideration, flexibility, forgiveness, tolerance, forbearance, supportiveness, understanding, patience, trust, trustworthiness, love, and compassion. When you practice acceptance, that does not mean that you weakly submit to the status quo. You are not a fatalist, nor do you tolerate evil. According to poet and theologian Kurt Mahler, Acceptance, if it is to be a virtue, is the humble recognition of where to begin. It is acknowledging what there is to work with. Self-acceptance, as I said, means accepting your flaws. You may be tempted by all the baubles on the internet, the self-help offers that promise you will be more productive, a leader, a commander of the universe, if you would only join their program. If you find yourself consistently drawn to the claims of self-appointed gurus, you probably cannot fully accept yourself as you. This does not mean change is not desirable. It is, and it will be. Certainly you have improved your life if you stopped smoking, for example. But your constant desire for change and your continued desire to sign up for these programs may mean you are failing to love yourself, to calm yourself, and to lead a healthy life with sufficient time for relaxation and interaction with other people. Which leads us right into the last chapter, where we talk about getting out there and doing stuff. Chapter 8. Get out there. Yes, you want to get out there. Perhaps after poring over this book, you were eager to do so. But it may be that you need help, perhaps from a therapist. Here is a look at the therapy most recommended for social anxiety, cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. Cognitive behavioral therapy. CBT therapists see social anxiety as a vicious cycle which spin off an array of unhelpful or perhaps harmful behaviors and negative thoughts. They generally refer to a model developed in 1995 by psychologists David Clark and Adrian Wells. The socially anxious client is presented with a situation that evokes a past negative experience, say giving a speech at a conference. A high school teacher has ridiculed this person during an oral presentation, and now they fear speaking in public. Remembering this, they are bombarded with negative thoughts, such as, I will struggle to speak, and my colleagues will notice. On the day of the presentation, they feel self-conscious, and during their speech, they grip their papers tighter so people will not see their handshaking. They know their voice is shaking as well, so they lower their voice. And they lower their head because they don't want colleagues to notice how they are blushing. This behavior only reinforces the fear they experienced, and they will experience it again if they have to speak in public. If their boss tells them they have to give another presentation in 2 weeks, they will immediately feel fear creeping up on them. CBT calls the blushing, shaking, lack of eye contact, and sweating safety behaviors. People think these behaviors will keep them safe. The truth is exactly the opposite. Also, the person will ruminate about the event and think the consequences of appearing that nervous in front of their coworkers is worse than it actually is. CBT helps with social anxiety by changing the way people think and behave. It encourages clients to question and readjust negative beliefs, to focus on outward stimuli instead of internal sensations, to seek repeated exposure to the feared situations, and it teaches social skills when there is a deficit. A person with a deep-rooted fear of public speaking may suffer from what CBT therapists call a negative core belief. They may be convinced of their worthlessness and unlikability. These core beliefs then lead to what are called intermediate beliefs. For example, they believe they must show they are always in control, and they know deep down that they cannot express their true feelings or perhaps show any emotion whatsoever. In turn, when faced with a situation they see as scary, their immediate beliefs trigger negative thoughts specific to that situation. These thoughts appear automatically and seem to come out of nowhere. As they stand before their peers and see a couple of them laughing, they think, they are laughing at me. CBT therapists use cognitive restructuring, often called reframing, to help a person change their 3 layers of thoughts. They have a person recall the specific automatic thoughts they had during a stressful situation, and from there help them uncover their intermediate attitudes and rules. After that, the therapist and patient deduct the client's fundamental core beliefs about themselves. Another way a therapist can help is to guide their client to focus their attention outward rather than inward. The patient learns not to focus so much on their inner self and their internal sensations. When they pay more attention to the task right in front of them, they become less conscious of sensations that used to deeply trouble them. However, social anxiety is not as easy to treat as other phobias because of what therapists call safety behaviors, as heretofore mentioned. For example, a person afraid of public speaking may keep their head lowered and avoid eye contact. Therefore, they never receive any positive feedback that would help them learn that public speaking is not so painful after all. Thus, they continue to experience the fear of speaking to an audience, who might be smiling or nodding their heads, but the speaker will never know. Their therapist has them write down a hierarchy of progressively more difficult behaviors for someone who hates to be the center of attention, and the client must practice them from the easiest to the most difficult. A list could look something like this: giving a speech at a wedding, presenting something during a work meeting, introducing myself to a group, asking a question during a work meeting, having a phone call while on public transportation, leaving and entering a theater while a movie is playing and having to pass several seated people in order to do so, calling the waiter at a crowded restaurant, calling out the name of a friend in a public place, asking the bus driver if they stop at a certain street, ringing the bell on my bike so people will let me through. Conquer social anxiety. The client has to start at the bottom of this list, or a similar one, tailored to each person, and work their way up. They keep on repeating each exercise until they feel comfortable doing it. This gradual and controlled approach helps assure them that these situations are not dangerous. These exercises, sometimes called habituation or extinction therapy, are the most important components of CBT for social anxiety. In this way, a person with social anxiety will no longer avoid situations that they previously feared or dive into such situation with only their old and useless coping mechanisms. Most people with social anxiety know proper social behavior, they just cannot accomplish it in certain situations, but some exceptions lack social skills altogether. In this case, the therapist will combine CBT with a modality called Social Skills Training, SST. After the therapist finds out which skills they lack, the therapist will have the client practice the skill through role play. I hope it is clear from this brief overview that the CBT approach requires a lot from the patient. They must be honest with the therapist, so the therapist knows which behavior they must work on. Also, they must be proactive and ask questions. Most importantly, they need to practice their assignments until they know they have achieved a certain level of comfort with them. Being your own therapist. A CBT intervention may not last long, perhaps 10 to 12 sessions. Therefore, a person nearing the end of their therapy must plan to become their own therapist and continue with their exercises. You might be wondering if a person could perform the CBT therapy on themselves. You would need to be honest with yourself about this. What is tricky are those safety behaviors, which tend to betray you and take you down into that black pool of feeling worthless the minute you find yourself in a scary situation. They defeat the entire purpose of the therapy and must be overcome before you can move forward. The thing is, you may have difficulty identifying these behaviors on your own without a therapist helping you analyze them. However, the practices we have mentioned before, such as journaling and meditation, may give you the proper insight to overcome them. Self-love. My friend, care for your psyche. Know thyself, for once we know ourselves, we may learn how to care for ourselves, Socrates once said. When you have social anxiety disorder, you cannot truly care for yourself because you are deficient in areas of your life that would provide the experiences necessary to engender and foster that crucial self-love. You may wonder how to begin the journey toward truly loving yourself. We all learned in childhood that our parents' love can be conditional. We are praised or punished, depending on our behavior. How then can we accept ourselves unconditionally? How do we embrace that inner child who still exists within us and tell it that it is okay to be our whole self? Positive affirmations can help. Tell yourself every day, I am enough, to let go of the belief that being as you are isn't good enough. You can find and read self-love quotes on the internet that will reinforce the concept of self-love and help you realize that it is essential to progress in life. Acknowledge your inner child and plan activities it would enjoy, such as going to the zoo, attending a game, participating in a sport, or painting. Doing these things will make you happy if you accept you will not do some activities perfectly, and that is okay. You are busy accepting yourself as you are. Along with self-acceptance comes belief in yourself and overcoming that inner critic so many of us endure. Remember that you have value. Can you see yourself through someone else's eyes, perhaps a friend or a partner? If you consider the value you add to that person's life, that can assist you in recognizing your own value. In this way, you can develop self-compassion, which in the long run may be more important than self-esteem. You develop compassion for yourself when you are kind to yourself, and also when you are mindful and acknowledge your common humanity. On the journey toward loving yourself, you must renounce resentment. This repressed anger will hurt you far more than it does the person with whom you are angry. A way to let go is to embrace your feelings, allowing them to move through you without judging them. As your feelings change, so does the world around you. Can you embrace that change as well? Realize that when you think you are in control, that is an illusion. Change is a constant in our lives, and it is useless to resist it. Whenever you have a negative thought about yourself, stop and ask yourself if it is really true. Are you actually like that, or is it just your inner critic? Just as you establish healthy boundaries with others, you can establish boundaries in your mind and limit what you think about. Some worrywarts know they will never completely stop worrying. They allow themselves a little bit of time in their day, perhaps 5 to 10 minutes, to worry all they want, and then they are done for that day at least. Building self-confidence. You lack self-confidence because you cannot do the things that most people consider normal. When you know that you are deficient in these areas, the negative feelings you might have for yourself erode what is left of your self-respect. A therapist can help you boost your self-confidence, but you have to continue doing the heavy lifting if you hope to change your problem behavior. We have discussed many elements for fostering self-love earlier in this book: journaling, meditation, proper diet, and enough exercise. These practices can be crucial in overcoming your anxiety and learning to love yourself more. Spend some time thinking about your life and the experiences that shaped you. Journal about these experiences and explore how they made you feel. Sometimes while writing, we have an epiphany. The act of writing itself reveals new insights. You may start to understand how early experiences shaped your behavior, and you may get a handle on the coping mechanisms you developed that you originally thought would make life easier for you, but instead make it that much harder. For example, when you lower your voice to almost a whisper so people can hardly hear you, you may think you are protecting yourself from potential criticism. If people really cannot make out what you are saying, they will have no grounds on which to criticize you, right? Wrong. If they can't hear you, they will never understand you, and they will turn away from you. Your ensuing isolation makes it really hard for you to love yourself, and your lack of self-confidence increases. When you write in your journal, you don't only want to concentrate on your problems alone. You need to remind yourself of your strengths as well. Make a list of your talents and strengths and say them aloud to yourself every day. Take note of any successes, however small or insignificant you think they are. Being knowledgeable about yourself and your problems may turn into navel-gazing if you do not take into account the perspectives and insights from talented writers on the topic of self-awareness. For example, Mark Nepo, in The Book of Awakening, Having the Life You Want by Being Present to the Life You Have, hopes to educate you on the reasons why you feel love in the first place. The book contains exercises to help you be aware of the present moment and feel the wonder of just being alive. Some books on the topic of self-awareness are workbooks or have journaling prompts that you can use every day. A workbook with exercises designed to help you transform into your ideal self is Alchemy 365, a self-awareness workbook by Brenda Morroy, who argues that fulfillment must come from within. People with social anxiety will find Nancy Richardson's Me, a self-awareness journal for women, particularly helpful. In this workbook, which appeals particularly to creative types, you will learn how to be more grateful and how to set goals. A book entitled The Resilience Journal, 100 Days of Mindful Gratitude by Dr. Kathleen Green has prompts to inspire gratitude and build resilience. Make sure to check out classic self-help books by the likes of Eckhart Tolle, Tony Robbins, Stephen Covey, and Daniel Coleman. Make a plan. Much as how a therapist might encourage a gradual approach to overcoming your social anxiety, you must come up with a plan to overcome these hurdles. Through journaling and reading, hopefully you know yourself a little better now. You know more about your goals and what you want out of life. Say you want to date more because you know that will make you happier. No matter your age, you probably have identified which crowd you would like to hang with. Now it is time to do a little reconnaissance. Try brainstorming to think of places where you might meet them. Before actually appearing in person, it would be a good idea to do some online research to find out what is happening where you live. Major population centers most likely will have websites to help you in your search. Once you find a group that interests you, see if you could follow them on social media and stay up to date with their latest activities. When you finally decide to make your move, make sure you look the part. First, just go there to observe how they speak, how they act with one another, and what they wear. Your goal is to make the best possible first impression. Remember that good grooming is essential. Some people have sensitive noses, and just a hint of body odor will turn them off. Make sure you have an up-to-date hairstyle and the appropriate makeup if you are a woman. You can find ideas for this in popular magazines. In average social situations, really expensive clothing is unnecessary, but your clothes should be stylish, clean, and wrinkle-free, without any holes or tears that are not made on purpose. Your body language communicates a lot about you before you even open your mouth. Smile, but have a genuine feeling behind it. Be sure to make eye contact with those you meet. Watch your posture. If seated, avoid defensive positions, such as keeping your arms or legs crossed. You want to appear open. You want to let people know that you are willing to be vulnerable. With a friendly and approachable manner, people will gravitate toward you. You plan to attend a group function well prepared. You have some idea of the group's purposes and what interests the people in attendance. With that in mind, take your insights further and brainstorm topics you can talk about. Perhaps there are some stories you can share you think they will like. Think about your life and what parts of it might interest others. Try to come up with humorous stories that people can relate to in some way or another. If you write them down, that will pique your memory to think of more. You need to have a few in mind to fall back on if your first story falls flat. Just as in the exercises a CBT therapist would have you do, start out small. Your first hurdle is to get yourself out of the house. Pat yourself on the back for doing so. Congratulations are in order. Realize that what seems like a breeze to other people truly is difficult for you. Your next task will be smiling at strangers and making eye contact with them. Only when you feel comfortable, say hello and ask them how they are doing. Again, congratulate yourself on a job well done. When you feel ready, hold a brief conversation with a stranger. Do this several times before you start in with your stories and some witty banter. Dealing with rejection. Everyone gets rejected at one time or another, and no one can claim it is a pleasant experience. However, the best way to deal with rejection may be to embrace it. Yes, rejection has a bright side, and when you concentrate on it, it doesn't sting quite as much. Rejection can tell you a lot about yourself and the progress you're making in building your self-confidence. For one thing, if someone rejects you, that means you're actually getting out there and taking steps to heal your low self-esteem. Also, usually the experience of rejection is not as bad as fearing it. Someone has been rude, so what? Taking it on the chin, as it were, makes you a lot stronger in the long run. You should be happy you've emerged from your cocoon into the real world. Being rejected tells you are a go-getter who will not sit passively by and stay a milquetoast no one can feel enthusiastic about. You can use rejection to measure your progress and know that you are closer to getting what you want and need out of life. If people see how well you handle rejection, they will know you are a strong person. Losing your fear of rejection helps you stand out from the crowd and develop charisma. You can dare to speak your mind and show the world who you really are. Rejection may help you have more compassion for others because you know how painful the experience can be. You realize that it was better to be rejected than only feel regret at never trying. You also may be more inclined to take risks on the chance you will succeed at achieving your dreams. Other people might be inspired by your example. Not only that, you can polish up your rejection story so they can admire your self-deprecating humor. When you think about it, learning how to be socially confident is much like any other skill. You have to practice to be good at it, and be persistent to get what you want. You cannot quit because you will fall back into your old loner life again. Be consistent and make it a habit to meet new people and start conversations with them. Take your mind off yourself and make that other person your focus. Give them your undivided attention and ask a few questions to get to know them better. They may really enjoy talking to you and look forward to seeing you again. Final words. If you have listened this far and have been doing some of the practices I have mentioned, I hope you will realize how far you have come and what you have achieved, even within a short amount of time. You know by now that none of this is easy. Having social anxiety is a real drawback to your progress in life. I should know. It is something I have struggled with as well. As we have learned, the causes of social anxiety are both physical and environmental. Some people just may have been born that way, with an overactive amygdala that causes the fight or flight reaction to go into high gear. But traumatic childhood experiences, like parental abuse or bullying at school, can also trigger it. Whatever the causes are in your case, you have shown a great courage by admitting to yourself you may have a problem and wanting to do something about it. We have also learned that a bad diet may exacerbate social anxiety. People who fail to eat a balanced diet may have nutritional deficiencies that sabotage the gut-brain connection. Also, exercise is extremely important for continued well-being. We talked quite a bit about forgiveness. That is a biggie for a lot of people whose religious background tells them they must forgive, but they find themselves unwilling or unable to do so. If you have had someone in your life who you believe gravely injured you, you may be one of those people. It is possible you are looking for the easy way out. Without this individual who messed up your life, or so you believe, who else do you have to blame for your own shortcomings? Self-improvement can be really difficult. It requires discipline and hard work. When you think that this individual robbed you of your joy in the world around you and left you a shadow of the person you were meant to be, the easiest way out is to blame them. That gap between your real self and the person you meet in the mirror every day always looms in the back of your mind. As we learned in the last chapter, the only way to combat this inner critic is radical self-love. When you let yourself feel self-love, your inner child will want to come out and play. Cherish those moments and do something good for yourself. Please remember that self-love is not the same as selfishness. When a person is selfish, that is their ego wanting to be in charge. Egocentricity is another bias built into our systems to help us survive in a hostile environment. The ego wants everything its own way with little regard for others. Consider that the individual or individuals who mistreated you were caught up in their egos. They were seeing life as a fight for the survival of the fittest. Being immersed in self-love is a totally different experience. You are finally able to relax and let go of fear and anger. I only included the exercises mentioned in this book because they may help you feel that comforting self-love. You are probably wondering, how will I have time to journal, exercise, meditate, and cook proper meals? I know doing all this is necessary if I want to overcome social anxiety, but I have a full life already. I work, I have kids, and there is always housework or yard work. This is something you have to decide for yourself. Everything that is valuable in life requires sacrifice, and you may realize that you have no choice if you want to be happy. Attaining work-life balance is a struggle in today's world. Various responsibilities will tug at a person, pulling them this way and that. There just doesn't seem to be enough time to do anything properly. Many people have searched for answers to this dilemma. Some have devised programs you can load onto your computer, such as to-do lists, to track tasks on a daily basis, and timers with alarms. I have mentioned 2 or 3 books that can help you with journaling, and there are many more. Some people prefer to keep their journals online, and several programs have been developed that can help with that. I mentioned Notion, but there are others like Obsidian, Roam, and Evernote, to name only a few. These programs are not precisely for journaling. Their main purpose is to be a place to store notes, but they can certainly work quite well as journals. I have already mentioned the analog bullet journal, which leaves the design of the journal up to you. You can download spreadsheets from various sources meant to help you with scheduling your day. These are less expensive alternatives to tried and true favorites like the Franklin Covey Journal or Daytimer. When you have a planner, how do you set it up? What are the best times for your practice? Or when can you reasonably fit in your self-help activities? The answers to these questions can vary as widely as the people who are seeking those answers. A favorite site for bloggers to try out their skills or reach an audience of their peers is medium.com. This is a membership site, but it is not too expensive. This site has reams of advice about the best way to schedule work and how to fit in meditation, exercise, and journaling. If you have a full-time job, you might find it productive to get up early in the morning and go to bed earlier at night to practice regularly. My hope for you is that you will overcome your social anxiety. Can you see it now? You will attend an event, and you will not be tongue-tied. You will not struggle for things to say. You will be at ease and find pleasure in the company of those around you. If you are troubled by scary or unpleasant memories, my hope is that they will recede into the past, where they belong. You are beginning to make new memories for yourself. Let's hope they are bright and beautiful.